Well, good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you and call the August 1st, 2022 Fayetteville City Council Work Session meeting to order. Welcome everyone back, council members from the month of July off, back, first meeting in August here. At this time, we ask you to please stand for the prayer invocation. I ask that council member and Pastor Larry Wright, if he wouldn't mind, give us invocation.
Yes, sir, Mayor. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, that we know your will is perfect. Bless this council, the mayor, staff, and the great citizens of this city. Bless this meeting tonight. Lead us, guide us, give us wisdom, God, that we might do the people's business, to move the city forward, to make best decisions, God, that we might be pleasing in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. So if we could pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. At this time, item 3.0 is the approval of the agenda. Council, can we have a motion to approve the?
So be it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, there's a motion by Councilmember Ingram, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, show of hands, and I know we're bringing up iPads. All those in favor? All right, Madam Clerk, motion carries unanimously. Item 4.01, Market House repurposing update. Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir. Director Yamil Nazar.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Hello. City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk. I thank you for the opportunity to return to share information related to the repurposing of the Market House. The Human Relations Commission has been actively working through the city spirit process to gather relevant feedback on the Market House repurposing for the better part of the last 2 years. We've heard from Fayetteville residents through an open survey, held listening sessions, brainstorming sessions, moderated activities, and consulted experts at the Department of Justice. I am happy to now introduce the chairwoman of the Fayetteville Cumberland Human Relations Commission, Simone Pemberton, and Vice Chairwoman Mylette Harris, who will brief you on the overview of the feedback gathered through the results. Also here with us tonight are members of the committee who have worked tirelessly to get this information to you. They were Mario Benavente and Dino Ondros. Thank you.
Good evening. All right, I will start. I'm Simone Pemberton, for those who don't know who's who. I'm Simone Pemberton, Chairwoman and Vice Chairwoman Mylette Harris. There's the thing, all right. All right, I will start by giving the history of what brought us here today, just to catch everybody up on what we've done in the last few months. As Yamil mentioned, this is a process. It's been about 1.5 years, 2 years in the making, so quite a bit of time. So I do want to first honor publicly those who have been part of this project. The Fayetteville Cumberland Human Relations Commission is made up of 100% volunteers, and that's from districts across Fayetteville and Cumberland County. Many have families, many have full-time jobs, businesses, heavy obligations, yet they showed up over and over to speak not only as community members, but on behalf of the community, working on behalf of the community. I also want to thank the community members who were not part of the commission, those who participated participated in City Spirit, which was nearly an 8-hour commitment during the workday, those who completed surveys, who came out to vote on the repurposing options. That was between April that just passed to June. And lastly, I want to thank DEI Director Yamil Nazar and staff for all of her hard work, all of their hard work, because truly we wouldn't have been able to do as much as we've done without her commitment and assistance. I want to make sure that it's understood that this wasn't just a quick resolution. This wasn't casually undertaken. It has been a commitment of hundreds of hours of discussion and labor. This was not a slow process or a fast process. It deserves forward motion, and the community is ready for it to move forward. We initially partnered with the Department of Justice Community Relations Service to facilitate dialogue within the community to come to a consensus on how to repurpose the Market House. We held 2 City Spirit events, one in October of last year and one in January of this year. And because of COVID constraints, we had to make it a little bit smaller, so we had 80 participants. From those meetings, the community identified several options for repurposing, which I presented to you when I was here last in March. At that time, you raised concerns about the number of participants that we had and how they were selected, and you requested that we go back to the community and get more input, and that's what we did. So we increased the number, let me move this forward. We increased the number of respondents to more than 500, so we went from 80 to more than 500. We created an online survey that mirrored the options available in person. It also included space for online participants to provide their own unique recommendations or suggestions. We made the survey public and captured responses from April to June 1st, so there was plenty of time to respond. We also conducted face-to-face community sessions, community input sessions. We had three live voting sessions in April and May. One occurred in April, one occurred around noon, one in the evening. In May, we had one on a Saturday, and those were to accommodate the different schedules of community members. Those who had schedules that didn't allow them to attend any of those, we recommended that they participate in the online survey. So they were still able to contribute. To ensure the community knew of their opportunity to participate, there was extensive marketing. There were staff announcements across the city where members of the Human Relations Department presented an overview of the project, provided key dates for input, gathered new recommendations, and provided the link for online participation. Most common of these were neighborhood meetings, but some of them were also business meetings and organization meetings like the Divine Nine, NAACP, Fayetteville Cumberland Youth Council, etc. It was shared widely on social media through personal pages on multiple platforms and boosted on the city's Facebook page. Multiple news outlets were on site to cover the face-to-face community input sessions. They also published online articles announcing meeting dates and providing the link to either register or participate online. The city also published details on their website and also on the Human Relations webpage. After polling completed, the results were compiled and provided to the ad hoc committee, which is chaired by Vice Chair Mylette Harris. And this committee met several times to drill down to the recommendations that are going to be made today. And I'll allow her to make those recommendations.
Good evening. Hello. So during the 2 face-to-face meetings, the participants in those meetings chose 5 participants from each meeting to go forward to make up the ad hoc committee. During the face-to-face meetings, those members elected, so we had a wide variety of members. We even had the youth to participate. One of the reasons why that is important is because the youth is what is going to be here after we all retire, whatever it is that we do, that road to glory. But it is important that we get the voice of the youth to carry on what we're trying to do. Without that voice, then we're losing a part of the population. As you know, as members of the youth graduate from college, a lot of them don't stay here in Fayetteville. They seek other places to live and be free and do things that young people do. So we have to make sure that we're encompassing that set of population into what we're doing. So we met 3 times on 3 occasions. We took that list, and it was a comprehensive list. It was over 500 things that people wanted to do. Although we had such a big list, it all narrowed down to the same thing. Everybody was wanting to education. So the committee feels that education is most important. What they mean by that is a true, accurate account of Fayetteville's history to include the Market House. Without that, we don't feel like we can move forward with some of the events that we would like to do. So while we're compiling that education, we would also like to make sure that the public has the education. So we're asking that the education piece not only be written, but it's different languages. We need to make sure that the hearing impaired is able to look at that. And in the 4 corners of the Market House, while we're compiling the education piece, we're asking that the 4 corners depict history of Fayetteville to include an informational so that people understand that as we're moving forward, we're working on the educational piece, and that 4 corners would encompass abstract art, art around Fayetteville, and we would like to have the art be commissioned by people here in Fayetteville. Who can better tell our story than those that work here in Fayetteville? And we have a large art community. That art community, it can be spoken word, pictures, drawings. That is what we're trying to accomplish. One of the other things that, let me move forward. I'm not sure where I am on this slide, but I have my own slide, so bear with me. One of the other things that we're asking is that the marquee at the Market House change to include language such as enslaved versus slave. Language is very important. Terminology is important. So we're asking that that Market House plaque also be changed to reflect enslaved. And we have other things that we would like, if you want to hear about those things as far as it goes to that plaque. And I'm on slide 7. I do apologize. So slide 7, it is provide the history, multi-language. When we talk about the history and how we're providing it, I know a lot of people don't do social media, but social media is the way to go. We're talking QR codes, Facebook, Instagram. Young kids are on Snapchat. So we need to be able to interface with those things as well. We don't want to forget our older population, so we need to make sure that it is in a format to which it can be read out loud or it's in bigger print. I know for my mother, I set up her cell phone, so I made it large. I made it to where she could ask for the numbers to be read out to her, so it's very user-friendly. So as we're doing that, we understand that at the Market House, it may not be ideal for those that have a handicap and disability, such as a wheelchair. So we want to make sure that whatever we're displaying, it is able to be reached by those that can't climb those stairs. Bear with me. So when we talk about regular published communication, that is so that we keep the public informed. One of the things that we realized when we were doing these talks with the community is a lot of people didn't know what we were doing, when we were doing it, so we want to make sure that we keep the community informed of the next step in the progress to ensure that everybody has it. We recommend reaching out to colleges for the history. Like I said before, that is the most important, and that is why I'm foot stomping history. Because if we don't get the history correct, we'll be back here again. And what we're trying to do is ensure that Fayetteville has the ability to move forward as one community. So we in the Fayetteville Human Relations Commission are asking the council to approve what we have and to allow the Fayetteville Cumberland Human Relations Committee to facilitate managing the progress of the project. Any questions for us?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions. Councilmember Hare and then Wright.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman and Mrs. Vice Chairman. Mrs. Vice Chair, you stated, Chairwoman, please forgive me. You just stated that you changed some words on the plaque.
Yes.
Could you tell me exactly how the plaque is read now and how you're suggesting it to be read?
Yes. So the plaque right now reads, "In memory and honor of those indomitable people who were stripped of their dignity when," and it says, "sold as slaves." We want to put enslaved, sold as slaves. So we want to make sure that it says enslaved, sold as slaves at this place. Their courage in this time is a proud heritage of all times. They endured the past so that the future could be one for freedom and justice. Their suffering, and it currently says shame. We want to change shame to strength. Afforded the opportunity for the future generations to be recognized as responsible citizens, free to live, work, and worship in the pursuit of the blessings of liberty to ourselves and prosperity.
Thank you, ma'am. I like that. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Ms. Harris, you said 500 people were involved in the survey?
Yes, that is the 2 face-to-face and the additional surveys that we conducted.
Okay, and then you said next steps. So my question is, what is the next steps from here after we approve this piece? What are we doing next?
The next step should be, after you approve this step, we should get historians and sociologists, to include economists, to look at the history of Fayetteville so that we can tell the history, to include how, I don't want to say marginalized, how minorities were affected by slavery moving forward.
So in essence, to make this historical monument something that we all could be proud of, how would that reflect as far as the true history? Because what you said, true account, true accurate account. Is it only about slavery, or is it about you're trying to get the whole encompass of what that market house meant from day one up until today. What true account are we focusing on?
Okay, so I did some researches, Google searches on Fayetteville, the market house, and slaves sold at the market house. Some of that information that's out there says that there were no slaves sold at the market house. There's other evidence that shows there were slaves sold at the market house. So what we're trying to do is get an accurate account of the history of Fayetteville to include those members sold at the market house. And so the market house itself, once the history has been accounted for, will stay the focus of Black history, Black African-American history. And the 4 pillars, once we've gotten that piece, will go to other cultures. So it will be different things in the four corners. So we don't plan on leaving anyone out of what we're trying to do, but we do need to account and atone for what happened in Fayetteville.
I agree. Thank you. I like the diverse piece as well to encompass the whole community.
Yes, thank you.
So one of the issues that I think we've had in the community prior to this council taking on this issue versus kicking it down the road is we were in the midst of this when things were kind of in the middle of 2020 when George Floyd situation happened, is that the building looks like it did back then. So it doesn't really have a purpose. Some people use it for this, some take pictures in front, but it doesn't really have a meaning, right? And I do believe that you have to tell historically about those things. And I think that's what that little small plaque is about this big tried to do back then, which was a big step for the people at that time. But now what you're saying, and I hope I'm hearing it correct, is that the wording, it be reworded and a little bit more visible, because you've got to go in it to see it, and it's only about that big.
Yes.
But the other part of what I like about what you're saying is that it has a purpose. It will then have a purpose. So you said some part is for art and spoken word, and some part is for some other things. Talk about the multi-use purpose of it. We know we got the history part, and I think that's good that we acknowledge that for the community. But tell us about the other uses of it, so that it's not the same building that it was back in 18 whatever when it was used, or it doesn't remind us of that. So I know art was a piece, and what else did you say in the presentation?
So art is a piece, spoken word, because art is in many forms, right? So art doesn't have to be just music. It doesn't have to just be pictures. Art can be spoken word, presentations, reenactment,
Gotcha.
Informative. On base, we do a lot of poster board where if we're going to do a special observance, which will educate the public on minorities who have done great things to enhance the military. Sometimes we do that on poster board, sometimes it's digital. Understanding that depending on what we put there, we need to have a way to secure it. So if it's a digital board, then it is a fixed fixture. You don't have to worry about anybody removing it. The only thing that you would worry about then is someone defacing said property.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I do like that aspect, because it now gives it some purpose rather than just sitting in the middle of a traffic circle, being a reminder of whatever people viewed it as during that time. So, thank you. Council, any other questions? Councilmember Ingram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to the committee for doing this volunteer work. You stated something in regards to talking about minorities who have did something with the military. Is that what you stated?
Yes, special observances, yes.
Okay, so in regards to that, this is a yes, and I want to also remember that not everybody is of military, and that can be a concern within the community, that there can always be this focus on military. And I support military members, service members to no end, but I just want there to be like a reminder that not everybody is of military, but we do support them, and so that they are family there may be family members who have never served but have a connection to that market house. And I just wouldn't want them to feel that they're not represented within this scope of the conversation. Go ahead.
Oh, when I talked about the special observances, I do apologize. That was an example of
Okay.
what we do
Okay.
on the
Thank you.
military side.
Okay, in addition to that, as you know, we have recently allocated $450,000 for the Black Voices Museum to do community work to get the buy-in of the community, as you will, in the scope and understanding. I think long-term, this should be a partnership, joint partnership with that effort. So I just wanted to make sure that is on record, that is an interest of mine. Thank you so much for going back to do this work. And once again, thank you for your volunteerism on this, because I know that this is a full volunteer position for you all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you so much for the presentation. I just had two questions that have not been addressed. One, what is your time frame that you're looking at for this?
Well, we would like the history part to start immediately. We have not discussed who would do the history, but we would like to have scholars from the college. And if you have nominees, we're more than welcome to look at those so that we can ensure that those scholars and the information has been vetted before we release it to the public.
Okay. And then my other question was on the ADA compliance. Can you just discuss what that portion looks like? Are you referring to, you mentioned so that everyone could get up to the center portion. So are you referring to having to move steps, add ramps? What does that portion look like, and does that include upstairs as well?
I believe that building is historic. Therefore, there are certain things that you cannot do to the building. So we are in agreement that some things, if there was a plaque that was upstairs, then there'd be a screen or a plaque that's downstairs so that people could see or know what was upstairs. That way they still have the ability to see what's up there.
Okay, but what about the steps around?
Then yes, we would definitely need a incline. But if I remember correctly, if you're standing at the corners, there is where you can walk off, and that's where you could have that ramp. So you're trying to look at what's already there and then add to versus reconstruct.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you. And before I go to Councilman Dawkins, Council, let's just remember tonight, I think, as they explained to us some of the components of the conversation, that we may not have all of the design answers tonight. I think that what we're looking for tonight, if there's a policy consensus to move it forward in concept, that I think the engagement of design professionals that can work in conjunction with some of the other design work that we allocated with the Black Voices. Certainly, I'm sure the university has capable people, either one of the universities or both, working in conjunction to help on the historical side of that. But tonight, as we ask our questions, because this is exciting news, the fact that we at least have an idea and a concept, that I'll bring us back to a decision point to see about moving it forward. And they may have some of the design specifics at that point. So, Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, ladies, for all of your hard work. Like you, Mr. Mayor, I think this is, in council, I think this is a good start. I really like what you're touching on. I think we've got to bring in the scholars from Fayetteville State, Methodist, FTCC, and wherever else we need to go. I know that the History Center has access to lots of African-American scholars because of doing their work. And we can make that happen, get you in touch with those folks. But I see this as a long-term project. This is a many-year project. So I appreciate, I definitely, let's get the plaque changed. However, the committee's got to vote on that, what the wording has to be. I'm definitely all in, and I'm going to support whatever motion that we bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ingram?
Mayor. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilman Ingram, then here.
Was prepared for
Oh, okay.
consensus.
Councilman Hill, you had a question?
And just a thought, because the ladies, the chair lady said that it was historical. I'm assuming that after we give you the motion to go forward, you're going to be in contact with the historical committee for downtown, and they can they can help you more with what can and cannot be
Yes.
done.
Right, and I think as you bring in the design folks, professionals, that they will work in compliance with the Historic Resource Commission and the compliance issues, because that's more their space. But, council, so I think we have addressed the, okay, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, before we summarize.
Okay, well, no question. I was just gonna commend you and thank you all for the work that you've done. Because when I initiate the proposal as far as opening it up for the citizens to have an input, you all did just that. So I just want to just commend you for your hard work and thank the council for their support as far as opening it up so that residents can have more of an input in this decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 500, from 80 to 500 is phenomenal, so I think you all did a great job. And council, in your motion, if you would consider authorizing the Human Relations to continue to be the lead in that from our end as they make contact and get us to the next step. I know you've been working on it a long time, but we really appreciate it, and I think you all have a good grasp of the situation. So anything staff support can do if the council gives consensus for this to move forward, we certainly want to be here for you. So, all right. So with that, council, I'll go to Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to gather consensus. One, to approve the proposed repurposing options provided in the U.S. DOJ City Spirit and Community Input recommendations, in the addition to allowing our Fayetteville Cumberland County Human Relations Commission to remain head of steering this initiative.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
There's a motion for consensus by Councilmember Ingram to approve as presented, seconded by Councilmember Wright. Any discussion on the consensus motion? All right, council, we'll try our iPads. I'll look to you for, all right, look to you for hands. Those in favor? All right, that's unanimous. Thank you all, good work.
Thank you.
All right. All right, council, moving forward to item 4.02, PWC electric rate rider. How you doing, Ms. Ball, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Let me get my presentation up. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to present recent electric rate action that occurred at the Public Works Commission. I also have one item for information, so this briefing is informational. I'll start with the summary. As you all may be aware, every 2 years we conduct a cost of service study for our electric rates, and we also do the same in water in alternating years. We had several key drivers. This most recent cost of service study effort, we have a new strategic plan, and we really focused on advancing conservation in our community, economic development, as well as customer satisfaction. The great news is our cost of service study revealed that our cost of service had not gone up. We've held it roughly the same. It increased by 0.1%. So as a result, PWC is continuing with the objective of maintaining our current base rates on the electric system through fiscal year 2024. In fiscal year 2024, we expect that we may be able to reduce rates. We are introducing some new rates and riders for our customers. The first is a new set of rates for residential customers and business customers that supports super off-peak or very off-peak usage. This will also help with electric vehicle adoption in our community. The rate's going to be effective in February 2023. We have some technology configuration that we need to do, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on what this EV rate is about. We also have introduced and our commission adopted a new renewable energy buyback rider, and again, this one will also be effective in February of 2023. You all may be aware that we have a solar rate right now called Buy All, Sell All. There are some advantages to the new rate that I'll go into. Most notably, it's going to reduce the cost of connecting systems to a person's home or business rooftop. We also are introducing an updated economic development rider. This is actually going to be effective in September of this year, and I'll go into more details with that rider in a moment. We did update some rates. We did bring in some additional customers with our medium power CP, and we also took an opportunity to look at the technology that we've deployed, and we actually have reduced some fees for connections and reconnections, and we'll go into that. So the first rate that I mentioned, the residential service whole home rate. What this is essentially a little bit higher base rate. So customers who want to opt into this rate would their basic facility charge would increase from $20 per month to $30, and they would be extended these super off-peak energy rates. So between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. year-round, they would be able to use electricity during that super off-peak period, and it's roughly half the cost of our current off-peak energy rate and well below our on-peak. Again, we're targeting this effective 2023. It's our intent that this rate is our very first optional residential service rate. Most of our rates have just been dictated to customers. This is what our rates are. So we're really trying to extend optional rates to give customers choice. So even if a customer doesn't want to buy an electric vehicle, if they just want to do their laundry late at night, they'll be able to take advantage of this rate and actually save some energy costs. A companion rate is for business. So small power service businesses can essentially do the same thing. They can push electric usage into that super off-peak period in exchange for an increase in their basic facility charge to take advantage of the extra low rate energy rates. And again, we'll be extending that super off-peak period year-round from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. I mentioned service charges. So we did take an opportunity to look at the service charges that we charge our customers. As you all may be aware, we have automated metering both on the electric and the water side. So we do a lot of our disconnection, reconnection, and hookups with customers electronically. And so we looked at our fees that we've had for these services, and historically we had not adjusted them. And we have actually lowered these fees in conjunction with the technology that we've deployed, and we've also lowered some testing fees. So I'm really pleased with the team. You know, in times where we have such inflationary environment, for us to be able to hold electric rates steady as well as reduce some service charges, we're really doing this to drive satisfaction with our customers. I mentioned economic development. This is going to be effective in September of this year. This economic development rider is very similar to one that is afforded to investor-owned utilities at the NCUC in the state of North Carolina. And effectively, if a new customer comes in and has a megawatt or more of new load, or an existing customer expands and has a 3/4 of a megawatt or more, and they have a certain number, 75 FTEs, and at least 400,000 capital investment in our community, we're extending an economic development rider. It's a 5-year declining discount, and it starts at about 22%, with year 6 going back to parity with our large power rates. So we're excited about this one. We think this is going to help us compete with other utilities in the region and be able to hopefully be another tool in our toolbox for both attracting new businesses as well as growing existing businesses. I mentioned the rooftop solar buy-all sell-all that we've had. Under our previous buy-all sell-all rider, we essentially had to have customers install 2 meter sets. One that would charge for consumption, how much energy you use on your home, and another that would measure how much energy you produce on a rooftop solar installation. Those 2 meter sets are pretty cost prohibitive, and so we only have about 60 rooftop solar customers on the residential side in our community, and we really wanted to step back and see how can we encourage rooftop adoption of solar without passing those costs on to other customers. And so effective in February 2023, we're going to have a renewable energy buyback rider, which is using a bidirectional meter, which is common in a number of areas in the United States. And this will allow us to offer this to customers, reduce their cost of entry, and also, charge them fairly for what they're consuming, and credit them or pay them for the production at a true avoided cost, which helps ensure that we don't pass costs on to other customers. So that concludes my comments on new rates and riders. Just wanted to also touch base with you all briefly about Some updates that we have in electric vehicles. So we have had an EV team that has been studying electric vehicle design since the latter part of last year. They've just concluded their work and presented to our commission in the spring. And essentially what we're wanting to do with electric vehicles is update our website. The rate design was a key part of this. We want to make sure that we can incent customers and offer them choices of products and services that they want. The EV team also has been looking at different models, from full ownership of charging infrastructure through sort of a SaaS model, or charging as a service. And so what we want to do is work collaboratively with the city and the county and other entities, other business customers, to help the entities figure out what model works best for them, right? Under some types of models, such as a hybrid model where, let's say, for example, the city might allow a charging station to be installed on their property, and also, may even want to own that charging station. They could profit share with a third party in the revenue that comes off of it. And then you can also have a full model where, the city would own all of the infrastructure and they could recoup all of that revenue from the customer. We at the utility are likely going to adopt a charging as a service model, but what we want to do is work with the city staff and identify, one, key areas where we think charging infrastructure is going to be really beneficial to customers in the community. We have a new tool that is called Blast Point, and it does a tremendous job in looking at customer patterns, looking at metadata, and helping us with artificial intelligence find where we think we should site that infrastructure. So we want to work with the city to identify locations, as well as identify the model that the city would like to adopt. And then, of course, we intend to install additional charging through a charging as a service model at PwC. And that's all I have. So if you have any PwC questions, feel free to fire
All right,
away.
we do have a couple.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Ball. Councilmember Hare.
Thank you, and how you doing tonight, Ms. Ball?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you. One of my questions, I was just writing it and you answered it. I was going to ask about additional charging stations, because we know that we have a limited amount throughout the city. But if you could go back to the slide, for some reason my laptop, it's not downloading. Could you go back to the off-peak, single phase? Yeah. Explain a little more in detail, if this is the right one, that if they pay more for this particular phase, then the off-peak phase would be cheaper. And what my thought was, how is it cheaper if you're going to be paying more up front? Could you explain that to me so I understand a little bit better?
Sure. So, for example, right now, a customer who may have a home right now is paying a basic facilities charge, or kind of your connection fee to be hooked up to the grid, of $20
Correct, it
per
is.
month, right?
Yes.
And so, depending on how they're using energy, if they're using energy on peak, they're paying 13.2 cents per kilowatt hour, right? So that's our on-peak rate. Our off-peak rates are currently 8.4 cents, or almost 8.5 cents. What we're doing is extending a super off-peak from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., where our energy will actually be 4.8 cents per kWh. So if you can move electrical usage into that window, you can save on your energy costs. And this is in part intended to help electric vehicle adoption, because many customers will charge their vehicles at night. And so this helps to do two things: incent electric vehicle adoption, but also ensure that charging's happening at a time when it doesn't stress our grid.
Okay, now, you brought in the vehicles, and I was talking about homes.
Sure.
So is that the same detail for homes? Because that's what I was speaking of, not the electric vehicles.
Yes, sir, it's exact same. If, for example, a customer just decided they want to shift their electrical usage patterns to this super off-peak period, like I mentioned, doing your laundry at night,
Right.
they would get this same rate differential.
And the other off-peak was 0.84 cents. What was the other one?
4.8.
4.8, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Ms.
Mayor Pro Tem Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report, Ms. Ball. I have a question, and I don't even know if it's a question. I just want to put it in your ear so you'll think of it. So I have a friend that comes down to visit her mother from Washington, D.C. twice a month, and she owns one of those very nice cars that needs to be charged. And of course, she lives on the north side of town. And just kind of want to put a little bug in your ear that maybe we need a charging station somewhere around the north side of town. We would greatly appreciate it.
Yep, I appreciate that. And we have
Don't take the
several,
bait, Ms. Ball.
we have several areas in the city that we would like to
There you
extend.
go.
Not just, yeah, we really do. We have 48 stations across different ownership models. Some are ChargePoint, some are EVgo, and then we have 4 that we have that we have installed. So we do think that there's a need to have additional charging infrastructure. And like I said, we're looking at the charging as a service model to help incent adoption of EVs.
Right, and I think that just to have it there, even, the charging it is for it is fine. It's just we don't have any. So thank you. I just want to put that little bug in your ear, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Now we had the north side plug, so I'm sure you'll have the rest. But we'll go to Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback off what Councilman Hare said, for those citizens who may have missed it, on peak, it's about 13 cents. Off peak is about 8 cents. If you wash your clothes from 9 to 5 a.m., it'll cost you 4 to 5 cents. So she's encouraging people to use that time, 9 p.m. to 0500, to take care of all of your washer and dryer stuff because it's cheaper. That's for just regular citizens who may be wondering off-peak, super off-peak. Do that late at night, 9 to 5 a.m.
Thank you, Mr. PWC Liaison. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Davis. Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you. So, Ms. Ball, one of the things that I've been following is Governor Cooper's, he did an executive order to have to reach a goal by 2030. And to me, this falls directly in the line when we're starting to talk about energy, low emissions, et cetera. So I'm glad that you talked about specifically city property, because my brain went directly to our rec centers and our parks, which is where people go to recreate and they spend time at. So while they are there, they can, do more than one thing at once. But what I wanted to ask is, because there is an executive order at the state, which in my mind makes it a lot easier for funding, grant funding or what have you, that can come from the state or even the federal level, is that a part of our legislative ask coming up if we are really looking at this and to make impact and have these charging stations all over the city, even down to the solar panel program?
Thank you for the question. And yes, there are a number of state mandates and new requirements as well. There's a Clean Carolinas plan from our wholesale provider that is in play as well. They're looking at rapid transformation of their generation fleet. So we have a lot of different moving pieces that are ultimately aligned to reduce emissions. And so for PWC, we absolutely are looking at grant opportunities. We formed a grant writing team both on the electric team as well as the water resources team. We just actually got our first ARP grant awarded to us for the sewer system. And we are looking at emerging tech, new smart grid opportunities, as well as EVs on the electric side. Okay. Most of those grant opportunities are going to come out this fall. And so we've got a team that are hawkishly watching to see where we can get dollars for the community.
Right, and then I'll say this as more of a listening ear for Mr. Michael Gibson. One of the things I have paid attention, I've been paying attention, is to that a lot of senior citizens drive the low emission cars with the electric cars. And so considering that we have a new senior center out west that gives reach for them, and more so focusing on really the gateways is what I thought I was understanding Mayor Pro Tem to say. But if we are to start something like that, really focusing on the gateways of the city for the people who are traveling in and out, which a lot of our Parks and Rec entities, they are coming within a very, very short radius of our gateways. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman. And you know, just a few miles up the road, there's a charging station right off of 95 in Lumberton. So hopefully our Highway 53 exit is applicable. Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just gonna piggyback what Councilwoman Ingram mentioned. It's actually one right across the street from the senior center at the Lake Rim Park. I think it's 3 stations, if I'm not mistaken.
There is one at Lake Rim.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Kinston.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do want to thank council and thank PWC because it was actually almost a year ago. It was on August the 2nd, 2021, when there was a council request that went in asking for a review of grants and for sources for the EV cars. And I've been asking, you know, when are we going to hear something? When are we going to hear something? So I'm glad tonight that that presentation was done to update us on that particular council request. Thank you. Much needed. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So, Ms. Ball, just kind of a follow-up. I did have a couple of questions on the actual presentation. One is, this is fantastic. I'm glad to see anytime we put money back in the pockets of our citizens. But there is a charge, as they said, that will increase. And for someone who doesn't take advantage of the 9P to 5A will actually be paying a little bit more, correct?
We are not adjusting the rates for our base rates. So that is not, they're not changing. But if they don't take advantage, they'll stay at the 20, let me go back here.
So what is the base facility $10 increase?
Yes, so these 2 rates that I've shared about the super off-peak are completely voluntary.
Okay.
So customers do not have to sign up for this. This is just if they look at their energy usage and say, this makes sense for me, then they can opt into this. They can always opt back out too. So for customers who do not opt into this new optional rate, they're for a single phase, which is the majority of residential homes, they'll continue to pay $20, which is what the current rates are.
This is just for those who opt in.
Correct, these
All
are
right.
optional.
And
Yes, sir.
second question I had is, you know, how are you, will these adjusted rates and these new riders impact the net asset value calculations?
They will not. We are not, in the cost of service study, we did not see any negative impact to net position. And in fact, in our most recent budget that we passed, and you're working off my memory, so this is subject to check, but I believe our increase was 4.25, I think nominally percent, based on an increase in net position.
Okay. And final question is, with you making the adjustment of these rates, how is PWC planning for whatever capital upgrades you have to do to keep up with the way energy is changing? So if the administration continues to push toward clean energy and we are an energy producer, are we prepared down the road for the capital upgrades necessary to comply with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually are in the process right now of doing a resource plan looking out 20 years, the resources of the utility. We have in our long-range capital plan baked in costs that we expect for both upgrades to our system, but also potential new resources in the future. And so right now, we're very fortunate. The electric system is in good shape. We're continuing to put a lot of cost pressure on ourselves. The biggest challenge that we've got right now, and we'll continue to see while we're under contract with our wholesale provider, is pressure on energy costs. So we do keep a number of reserves, and we get a lot of questions about the reserves. Right now, energy prices globally are ticking up considerably. Duke does rely on coal, they rely on uranium, they rely on natural gas. Those costs are passed to us. They have been increasing month over month over month. We have continued to work with Duke. It's just a function of being in a global market from a commodity perspective. But what we've been doing is using our electric rate stabilization fund to help manage costs for customers. And so as their transition, as they retire plants and build new plant occurs, it's going to put pressure on our rates. So we're going to continue to need to manage that.
Okay. All right. So Well, with that, I didn't see any action that you had. Councilman Jones, you had a question? All right, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. I wanted to circle back around to the rooftop panels. I think you answered this some months ago because we had some residents that were really interested in putting those on, but the benefit at that time wasn't really, it wasn't beneficial to them. So I wanted to ask, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, back then we were looking at the credit couldn't exceed the basic service fee. Was that in line with what previously was? So now there's a potential that that credit may be able to be increased.
So one thing that we are being very careful about is not to design a program where renewable energy or rooftop solar customers can essentially not pay for the fixed costs associated with the grid.
Sure.
Because what we found is those designs that have done that, such as California, have created huge intra-class subsidies, and whereby a lot of wealthy people are not paying their share, and a lot of poor people who are not able to afford rooftop solar are picking up the tab from a fixed cost perspective. So we're really were thoughtful about that. And so what we're doing is charging at the full retail rate that everyone else is, but providing for production, it's gonna be calendar year based, but calculated credit for the value of that production. And that credit can't exceed the monthly energy charge, and it's not gonna be carried forward year over year. The intent there is we wanna bring down the cost of entry into rooftop solar, which is why going from 2 meter sets to the 1 bidirectional meter is a huge component of this. But we also wanted to be thoughtful and careful that those who can and want to adopt rooftop solar don't push their share of fixed costs onto other customers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yes,
I
sir.
think that's a good medium where we can be. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, council, any other questions? Ms. Ball, you didn't need anything from us. I guess during the next council meeting, will we have to vote or take any official action on these riders?
Yep, this is
Or
just informational.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for it. Good job over there. All right, council will move forward to the next item of business, which is item 4.03, Transit Development Plan Update.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, this will be presented by our Director, Tiffany.
Our new director, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see what's going on real quick. Let's see what we got.
Congratulations.
Can I say something?
Mayor Pro Tem Jensen.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, because we were using the iPads and we're not, if you would like to speak, if y'all could help me out, kind of look at me and raise your hand. It's a little bit of a challenge because we have this thing here. So if you could look at me and I will nod to you and put my thumbs up. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem. Well, congratulations, Madam Director. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and all the members of the City Council. My name is Tiffany Neal. I am the newly appointed Transit Director for FAST, and I'm excited to present our Transit Development Plan. After a year-long process, we are finally here. So what we will discuss today is our Transit Development Plan. What is a Transit Development Plan? Our plan. A few fast facts that we've found during this process, some recommendations, and then the best part, which is the finance plan. So, Transit Development Plan. What is a Transit Development Plan, or what we refer to as a TDP? A TDP is a 10-year vision. It's our business plan. It incorporated significant community input, and it covered 5 different areas of improvements. Those 5 areas include fast services, it included infrastructure, technology, plans, and policies. Within this plan, we are looking to do a couple of things over a 3-step process. Throughout the process, you'll find that we want to rebuild our service, we want to improve our service, and we want to expand our service. One of the goals of this plan is to increase the number of riders that we have with FAST, as well as improving our customer experience. One of the things we'd like to do is transition our service from a system of need to a system of choice. And with that, I'll start with step 1, which is rebuilding our service. Now, prior to COVID, we were operating service levels to 10 or 10:30 in the evenings. Well, as a result, in 2020, we scaled back a little bit. COVID allowed us to stop, to pause, to take a step back and look at if it makes sense for us to go back to providing the same level of service the way we were providing pre-pandemic. Step 2 is all about the customer experience, improving our service, making sure that we are transitioning from need to choice, making sure that our customer experience is our number one priority. And number 3, that regionalization. It's one of the things that I know has been a hot topic, at least since I've been here for the past 4 or 5 years. And so we'd like to talk about what an expansion of service to the airport, Hope Mills, Spring Lake, surrounding communities and counties, what that really looks like. With that, now we'll talk a few minutes about Fast Facts. So FAST is not just a transit system for those that need us. It is not based upon your economic status. FAST is for everyone. It is for all of our citizens, all of our commuters, all of our visitors. What we know is that during the pandemic, we were reminded of the value that of having transit within our community. We were reminded of how essential we actually are. So we want to be the primary mode of transportation for everyone within our community. If we are not the primary, we definitely want to be a second vehicle for every household. We've learned that we provide essential trips to work and school for over half of our riders. If that's not essential, I don't know what is. We continue to recruit and retain, recruit and retain, recruit and retain. It's no secret within our industry. It is hard for us to recruit CDL licensed operators. Thank goodness we've been able to partner with FTCC. We had our first graduating class last month, so we're really excited about that. Our second class starts tomorrow. We're excited about that. And we are actively recruiting for our third class to take effect in September. Retaining employees has been a big push for us because we know everyone's hiring, so everyone has the opportunity to sweep our employees away from us. But as we are looking to be an employer of choice, we are very thankful to the city manager for approving and to you for adopting the budget, which includes incentivizing our employees, and that has been wonderful for us. Next, we continue to look for competitive grants and secure competitive grants. Very excited that we are at the table now with our consultant CTE for our electric vehicles, and we are looking at working through our cashless fare system and working through that grant as well. We've been able to do all of this over the past 2 years without acquiring any fares over the past 2 years and not increasing with any fares since 2013. So during this process, we did a few things. We had a couple of listening sessions for our community, and thank you to each of you who were a part of that, who participated that or provided any input regarding that. We had 3 project advisory committee meetings. We had a transit operations conversation. It involved our operators, dispatchers, supervisors, and we also had a public survey. And here are a few things that we heard. The number one thing we heard was improving or increasing our frequency. We want to make sure that we are providing an increase in our frequency. So that means if one trip from origin back to origin takes an hour, we want to look at how do we change that 60-minute headway to a 30-minute headway and have a vehicle every half hour on a certain route. Again, we heard that we needed to provide service to the airport, Hope Mills, Spring Lake, and that we needed to provide more service to Fort Bragg. And I'm very pleased that Lieutenant Colonel Taylor is here from Fort Bragg as a partner. He has been at the table with us from the beginning and very interested in our partnership moving forward. So here are our recommendations. Remember, I mentioned the 3 phases, the 3 steps. We'll look at rebuilding our service, improving our service, and expanding our service. Rebuilding our service, returning our nighttime service. What does that look like? Now, I know before we were providing 30, 35-foot vehicle to provide nighttime service. Well, we may not want to do that. We may want to introduce what we call microtransit, and I'll talk a little bit about that. A part of the rebuilding of service, we also want to implement that West Fayetteville route that we've been talking about for some time, that we haven't been able to do, but we have been provided the funding to be able to do it, and so we are working to increase our staffing levels to be able to provide that service. We want to again increase our service to Fort Bragg. And a part of us, as we get ready to transition to step 2, we've got to review our staffing levels. One of the things I'm sure is not a secret is many transit systems have had a hard time with staffing. Dallas, Texas had an article recently about them starting some new service in 22. They had advertised, marketed for the service, and they couldn't run it even day one because they didn't have the staffing. Charlotte is going through some changes right now where they were trying to restore back to pre-pandemic levels with their absenteeism and all kinds of craziness going on in Charlotte. They've actually had to redo their routing to scale down. Thankfully, we have been able to maintain our reduced levels throughout COVID, and that's an accomplishment. That really is an accomplishment. Our employees have been keeping the wheels turning, and so we are very, very thankful. Also, this past week, our employees were very excited when they received their compensation letters about their increases they're going to get, so we definitely want to say thank you to you for that as well. Lastly, a part of step 1, we need to prepare a marketing plan that is going to prepare us for step 2 and the promotion of those services that we'll need to improve our service. Now, as I mentioned before, a little bit about microtransit. It's a public version of Uber Lyft. It's fairly new to our industry. It's a use of smaller vehicles on a shared transportation system. Currently, Wilson, North Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina currently use microtransit. Wake County is actually undergoing a pilot program right now, looking at if they want to utilize microtransit in their service. So we want to explore that option to see if that's something we'd like to do. We are looking at coming back before you on August 22nd to provide an administrative report giving a little more details about microtransit. Step 2 would be improvement of our service. This is where we're really going to focus on attracting those choice riders. We want to improve our frequency. As I stated before, if we have a bus that takes an hour to go from origin back to origin, we want to transition that to a 30-minute headway. We want to do it strategically so all the routes wouldn't happen all at once, but we would start with our higher frequent routes first. We'll also look at modernizing and enhancing our transfer locations. At the Transit Center, we just added a very modern shelter for Greyhound. They love it. It's really nice, very modern. We just updated our transfer location at the mall with some modern shelters. We have one on back order that we're waiting for, but the mall was very pleased about the upgrades. So we're excited about that. We also, in step 2, want to make sure that we recruit and educate our developers. We want to be at the table when it comes to development. So we want to work with our planning department to make sure that we're not an afterthought with transit, that we are at the table, again, attracting choice riders. And from here, we will continue to expand on our marketing plan. Last but not least, we will expand our service going regional. We want to fly Faye. That's where we want to go. We want to make sure that we continue to be at the table and have discussions with Hope Mills and Spring Lake. They are very interested in coordinating and partnering with FAST, so we're really excited about that. One of the questions we got asked during this process was, why aren't we expanding service earlier in the process? And what I can tell you is we wanted to take care of home first. So we wanted to start and make sure we got ourselves back to pre-pandemic levels. We made improvements to make sure that we are attracting our choice riders first before we started to branch out. But expanding the service is still a priority for us. We will continue in one of these areas that I know is hot, which is benches and shelters and ADA improvements. We spend about $140,000 annually on these investments with our shelters and improvements. We are looking at modernizing as we move forward, modernizing our amenities. Our vehicle replacements, as I spoke before, our electric buses are scheduled to arrive the end of 2023, the last quarter in 23, sometime or into the first quarter of 2024. So we're really excited about that. We want to continue to institute good repair principles by preserving and expanding the life of our fleet. So as you can see, here's our 10-year timeline, and that's all of the different steps within the timeline. So again, as I stated before, now we get to the good part, which is the finance plan. So I am not standing before you today asking you to commit to any funds, although if you'd like to, I'm here for it. This is not a budget, but a 10-year plan, and it's just the planning level projections, the big picture. If we're looking at taking FAST from a system of need to a system of choice, obviously, we have to talk about the funding. So as you'll see on this slide, it is our operating expenses. You will see that there is some increases in the step 2, more so than any other step within the plan. That's because that's the step of the transit development plan in which we would look at increasing our capital and increasing our human capital as well. Right now, we are at capacity on Grove Street. That's our operations and maintenance facility. And so a part of step 1, we need to look at a feasibility study. That would look at where we currently are structured, where our future needs are, and how we get there. Looking at evaluating some of our alternative options for, do we need to move from Grove Street? Do we need to identify a new location? What are those things we need to do to create the capacity for this additional capital? So that's what we would look at with the feasibility study. As you can see, we've also included some projections on revenues. Those would include just currently where we are with our revenue sources and our revenue funding right now. It does not include any competitive grants that we would qualify for, so it can only get better from here. With the more competitive grants that we acquire, the more revenue we will obtain. Last but not least, our transit funding per capita. The transit development plan allowed us to identify 10 of our peers. As you can see, we are the 3rd lowest when it comes to transit funding per capita. We are only higher than Columbus, Georgia, and High Point, North Carolina. One of the things that we found very interesting is that FAST actually provides 98% of the level of service that our peer partners provide. We provide 98% of the services that they provide with only 80% of their funding. That speaks volumes to our efficiency. What that also says, though, is as we begin to transition and move towards a system of choice, we are going to need to explore additional transit funding options, and we will need to have a larger conversation about that. If you want to commit to anything tonight, we'll take it. With that being said, before I turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor and Council, I would like to take the time to thank our VHB partners who have been here with us along the way. This is Laura Everett, our senior project manager. Thank you, sorry. We have Paige Dickerhoff, who is our project planner. Our special thanks to Fort Bragg, Lieutenant Colonel Taylor, for being a part of the process the whole way. We definitely want to thank our FACT chairperson and FACT committee who have shown up tonight as well. Thank you as well. And I definitely want to thank our team who has shown up to support not only the transit development plan, but show their support for FAST and where we are going. With that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor, for questions.
Thank you so much. Start with, do have a question myself. I'll start with Councilmember Jones, Ingram, and Hare.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Not so much a question. I had the opportunity to attend some of the meetings and hear what the consultants had to share, which was phenomenal. So I'm glad to hear that we're pushing forward with expanding the services and into Fort Bragg, Spring Lake area. So I'm excited about the direction of it. And I like to hear you say transit system, not a bus system.
Right.
Transit system. So I wanted to just make that clear. But it's really impressive to see how much work has been done with limited fares, not an increase in fares in 9 years, almost 10 years, and then going through a period where there were no fares whatsoever. And I just wanted to just tell you all, thank you so much. I had an opportunity to meet you and your staff, everyone, and just to see what the citizens have the opportunity to experience when they use any part of our transit system. They're in good hands. So I just wanted to say that thank you so much. It's reassuring to know that the progress that the transit system has been enduring, it will continue, and it's in capable hands. So I just want to say thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones.
Thank you. Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you. You actually answered one of the questions I had, which was surrounding the facility. on Grove Street. While I do represent District 2, I do like to think about the rest of the city, and I do think if we were to look at an additional or moving, I think where one is, it should be in another place. So I would think, yes, staying East Fayetteville, North Fayetteville, but also an additional facility out West Fayetteville, because we are growing outward that direction. And if we are talking about the bus line towards Fort Bragg, I think that's more beneficial. And in addition to, if the bond does not pass for our infrastructure, that'll be more work on our streets. So, put it where it needs to go. But I wholeheartedly look forward to being able to ride the transit system, because our streets are getting to a place where I feel like I'm tired of getting tires for my car, so I'd rather ride the bus and let that do what it does. But anyway, thank you so much. I'm very excited about where this is going as someone who has relied on transit in Atlanta for 5 years plus by choice. I look forward to being able to get on our transit system at will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ingram. Councilmember Hare.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Tiffany Neal,
Yes, sir.
thank you for your presentation and thank you for the excitement in your voice tonight as we move forward with our transit development plan. I've been on council long enough. I've seen how where we once were when buses were coming down the street, leaning one way, leaning like a bird, flying, and where we have developed from to where we are now, and with the expanded routes and just the whole consistency that we've had, as you stated, with limited staff, we have been consistent in moving forward. So I applaud you all for that. I'm I don't want to say constantly, but consistently, I guess that's the same word, receiving calls of people that go to certain shelters, bus stops with the shelter, and it has someone staying there. And I know that we are doing a lot to help our homeless community, and that's one of our #1 priorities in helping homeless. But I do receive those calls. Sometimes I'm not really sure how to answer that question, so I just send it on to staff, and that way. Is there anything that we can do for that concern? And I know it's almost a two-part kind of answer, because we want to help our resident that's homeless, but at the same time, those that ride the bus and might want to use the shelter, and especially if it's inclement weather or hot weather, you want a shelter over your head. So I do understand, but I understand both parallels of that. Is there anything that you think, or is it something we're working on? If you don't have an answer for that, I understand that.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that that we are very sensitive and understand that
Yes.
there is a concern out there. One of the things that our operators have done a great job of is if they see something, say something. So they are calling in. A supervisor will go out and talk with the individual and really try to explain to them, why we need to free up the space, why they can't stay. PD has been phenomenal in assisting us when we run into those challenges. So I can't say that I have a solution for that right now, but it is definitely something that we think about and are actively working on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Councilmember Wright, and then Banks McLaughlin.
Yes, Ms. Neal, I have no doubt that you would do a great job to take the transit system to the next level for our city. And the plan is great. I'm excited to see some of the expansions, especially to the other cities, that connectivity is everything. But I have a question concerning bus stops. how do you determine where the bus stops are located?
So we actually meet with our engineering department as well. We look at ridership on routes as well to make some determinations. We also look at who owns the street, the right-of-way as well, to see if we can place bus stops on a certain street. So it's various factors that we look at. We have to make sure that the property, if it's owned by a private party, that we reach out to them as well. I mean, it's a multi-factor.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. So the reason I asked that question is I have gotten a call several times about a bus stop located in Hollywood Heights off of Louise Circle.
Okay.
So when you come into Hollywood Heights, you come across the new bridge and the sidewalk. And so when you get that split, Louise Circle and Louise Drive, it's a bus stop at that stop. But the resident says that the bus goes the other way. And when I went by to check it out, I saw the location, and people have to walk a pretty good distance to get to that bus stop.
Yes, sir.
Because it's coming right into the neighborhood. So if you can, take a look at that, and I would suggest probably that it would put it down by the park.
Okay.
It'll kind of be in the middle of the neighborhood, kind of say, because if the bus got to go through there anyway, the park would be a better location because people won't have to walk as far to get there because it's right. It's a long distance.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that or
Yes,
not.
sir. We can take a look at that and then follow back up with you this week,
Thank you.
if that's okay.
You got
Yes,
to
sir.
follow up quick.
Yes, sir.
Follow. No. Yeah. You feel? No, you can follow up anytime. I might go on vacation or something. Yeah. Call me in Hawaii.
Yes, sir.
All right, Councilmember Wright. That was good. All right, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that was a great presentation. Congratulations on your new role, Soror.
Thank you.
I am excited about the partnership with Fort Bragg, absolutely. Fort Bragg, Spring Lake, and Hope Mills. And I'm also happy that we were able to allocate funding for the West Fayetteville. So we're working on that before we partner with, partner with other cities. So I'm absolutely happy and excited about that. And I definitely would like to get more information. Are you going to provide information about the microtransit at our next meeting or just in the future?
August 22nd.
August
meeting.
22nd.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I look forward to hearing that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Neal, again, I certainly echo and second everything they've said. Can you go back a couple slides for me? I do have a couple things. I was talking to Mayor Lyles in Charlotte, and they are petitioning the legislature to allow extra sales tax for transportation. I know that is one of the allowable uses according to the statute that a certain amount can be added, and sales tax generates about $35 million here a year, roughly 35 to 40. And in order to obtain your goals, I think the one I was looking for is your finance plan. So rebuild service, that's up through 2025. Improved service wouldn't start until 2026. So if you had a recurring funding source, like sales tax, could that improved service piece be expedited?
Yes, I would think so.
Okay. And so I think, council, as we talk about this, if we really want to go from need to choice, you got to have a funding source because since 2013, we know the cost of everything's gone up, particularly this year. So the general fund has supplemented that. So the ad valorem tax base and what we bring in, we write a check for what they don't collect. They haven't raised fares. And obviously you can't put this level of expense on the people riding the bus, so it's not feasible for them to ride it. So there has to be a recurring tax source. So I think transportation is an option according to the statute to ask for, additional half cent that would go a long way in transportation. And when we talk transportation, let's look a little broader than just the transit bus piece. I mean, transportation in Charlotte includes the little light rail downtown. It includes a lot of things. So I think incumbent upon us to do that, to find the money if we really want to take this thing from need to choice. So that's one. Secondly, to follow up with Councilmember Hare on the shelters, if we spend $140,000 annually, I know you're working off of a shoestring. What do we need to spend in order to get the shelter piece addressed? Because that's something we deal with that every year during budget. You know, we bang the drum and try to get whatever shelters out of the storage closet or wherever they keep it to get it put up. What do we need to spend? How short are we on that if we're spending 140 to currently?
So are you asking how much do we need to spend?
So
for
in other words, the 140 takes care of the maintenance, I guess, and installation of how many? And so I'm sure you had to tailor that to the amount of budget you have. So if you had the ability to fund what we need, what does it take for us to get fully up to speed on that?
Oh, shelter.
Yeah. I think speaking to where you already are.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So one thing to look at is how many shelters and benches we already have on the system and how many riders that is actually accommodating already, which is significant in Fayetteville. You all are doing a great job already. So Tiffany, help me, 106 bus stops have benches and shelters, which is about 17%. 45 additional bus stops have benches only, which is about 7%. And that covers something like 87% of your boardings. So you're actually talking about, you know, a large number of the people who would actually be waiting at the bus stop have shelter.
Okay.
So one piece, just to go back to a conversation we were having a second ago, is that at your busy shelters, you probably have less trouble with individuals experiencing homelessness. But if you had a shelter where no one's using it to get on the bus, or very few people are using it to get on the bus, that may not be the case.
Okay,
Just
yeah, I understand.
if that's
And so basically, the high volume sites
Right.
is what you're saying versus put them at all sites.
Yes, and that is exactly what FAST has been doing. They take that amount of budget that they're going to spend every year on shelters and benches, and they look at where the high volume stops are and kind of just go down the list. The next 20 shelters get a, you know, and stops get a shelter.
Okay, that makes sense. And as you go from need to choice, just from a safety perspective, you know, female, young kids goes to a shelter. There are people there who are not catching the bus, who are using it for shelter. What are some of the best practices? Because I know that can't be just a Fayetteville problem. Hopefully our county will step up and build a homeless shelter that'll give some options for that. But until then, we're reaping again the repercussions of that. What are some of the best practices about how to deal with that? And I know this is a policy perspective about it, but you're saying, one, they've increased communication. So your drivers, if they see an issue, they say something, and then we're able to work toward mitigation of that. So how do we, what are some of your industry standards to discourage that? Are there shelters that give some sense of shelter, but maybe not a sleeping enough for someone to spend the night and sleep there? What are some of the latest technologies on coverings? Because really what it is to take the elements away while someone is waiting to catch the bus. And if we cut down on the travel time, then that's not a long duration of time, hopefully. So what are we looking, do we have the latest benches and shelters? I know those that we have been out for some time. Are there others that are out on the market that may address some of what I'm saying? That instead of it being a full bench, it could be something that provides coverage and maybe individual seats versus something that people could sleep on? What are some of the market options?
I mean, certainly there are different designs, especially with regard to the bench, that can discourage folks from laying down. I don't think I am an expert enough in individuals experiencing homelessness to speak about how to.
No,
conquer
I'm
that
talking about
problem,
from a equipment standpoint.
Right.
Okay, if you had a bench that was more of a temporary versus a long-term setup, but it still accomplished the same goal.
There are several different styles of benches and things like that. They have some benches that don't have a flat seat that kind of angle, so,
Yeah.
you know, if you're laying, you fall over. They have some with the bars, like we have some of our benches with the bars in between, so it does provide that individual seating, so it's not just one flat bar. So there are some out there, and as we are looking at modernizing our shelters, we are looking at what those alternatives are, some of those options that we can pursue.
Okay, all
Yes,
right,
sir.
and that's good. And the last question I have, how about trash cans? Do all bus stops where people are waiting have trash cans? I think one of the issues that we have with litter is that we don't have enough public trash can options. So,
Yes, sir.
you know, I want to bring that to council with some of the other areas that people gather for trash cans. But do all of our benches and bus stops have trash cans? And if not, how can we get an account as to what we need to deal with that?
All of our benches and benches with shelters have the trash cans, but most of, if not all of the stops with just the pole do not.
Okay, so that's something we can do. Because if someone is eating or have something in their hand, you don't have a trash can. You
Yes,
just,
sir.
okay,
Yes,
all
sir.
right.
We have increased the capacity of our cans though, Mr. Mayor, so that we can have more to absorb in between cycles of
Okay.
pickup.
All right,
Yes, sir.
all right. Council, any other questions? Transit? All right, well, I think you all are doing a phenomenal job. Keep at it. We got to find you some money now, huh?
Yes, sir.
All right,
Thank you.
all right. All right, council, we'll move to item 4.04, camping in public and private property ordinance, chapter 17.
This will be provided by Mr. Brooke Redding and staff.
Mr. Redding, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Get this PowerPoint pulled up. So again, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Brooke Redding, Special Project Manager from the City Manager's Office, and I'm here tonight to present camping ordinance and discuss some of the homeless encampment initiatives that we've been working on for the past 18-plus months. So for tonight's agenda and purpose, we'll revisit kind of the things we went over before back in May, kind of give a little bit of the context of everything that we discussed at that point and what we've done since then. But the main purpose is to really present council with the proposed ordinance, the recommendations for camping on public and private property. So just again, to visit the background, up until 2022 in May, we had done everything, all the activities with the homeless encampments, and created a series of recommendations to work on. So we presented that in the task force findings and our recommendations. Additionally, Council, you had directed us to go and further develop the impact reduction program, our primary recommendation, with a continuum of care. And at that time, you did not take any action and asked staff to return at this time in August. In June, we went through a series of iterative meetings with the continuum of care. So we took our impact reduction program, we took the protocol, the policy, we solicited that with the COC board, and then had an active discussion through a series of meetings that ranged from 90 minutes to 2.5 hours, and discussed at length what we were proposing to do and how we were proposing to do it. The COC presented over 100 different questions about the protocol. Staff answered those questions and then systematically revised our recommendation with the COC so that now our primary program we're developing and asking to eventually get to is by, with, and through the continuum of care as it should be. In July, we met with the members of the COC, so just beyond the board, into all of the nonprofits and the service agencies that actually provide these support services to our homeless residents. We had a Q&A and we discussed the manual at length. And once that was complete, we finalized that impact reduction program and kind of packaged it all back up to bring us to this meeting. So to revisit the 4 primary recommendations that the Homeless Encampment Task Force did create, the first is an ordinance, which we're here again to really get into the details of that. A city policy which standardizes and formalizes the actions of us as government officials in that process of the impact reduction program, the IRP itself, and a right-of-way agreement with NCDOT, which we have been very successful in continuing to move and have that conversation at high levels with the state agency and other members of the state to eventually and hopefully support us in this process. So first, we'll kind of touch base about our current camping ordinance. As you can see, simple slide, but the definition of camping in our ordinance is a place where tents, huts, or temporary shelters are set up. That's it. What that ordinance does, the few lines that is in Chapter 17, is that it prohibits overnight camping at parks and cemeteries. It leaves other venues in the city open, and it does not prohibit camping on private property or other city-owned property. Our recommendation in the ordinance that you have a printed copy with yourselves at the dais now presents these kind of three components together. No camping on public property, no sleeping in vehicles on public property, and all tents and shelters should be removed or deconstructed during daylight hours to prevent the risks associated with them. So on that document that I distributed to council, if you go to page 3 at paragraph C, is the unlawful camping on public property portion, should council want to follow along with kind of what we're covering here. There's 4 points to that ordinance section in section C. The first 2 are the least limiting components should council choose to adopt that very least limiting portion of the ordinance. And what that does is that it prohibits camping on public property when there's available overnight shelter, or that encampment presents a public health and safety risk, regardless of the shelter's availability. This provides the basis for the impact reduction program's protocol. So everything we've asked to do and everything we've developed in that program, this, at a minimum, would at least give us the legal basis needed to execute that. In addition to that, the next level would be moderately limiting ordinance. So at paragraph C, sections 1 and 2, if you add section 3, you now go into a moderately limiting ordinance where camping or sleeping in a vehicle on public property is prohibited when there's available overnight shelter, or it presents a public health and safety risk regardless of shelter availability, and sleeping in a vehicle is prohibited between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. on all public property. And then from that point, the next step would be to go to the most limiting. And that's where you include all 4 sections of the ordinance recommendation that council has in front of them now. This most limiting is saying that camping or sleeping in a vehicle on public property is prohibited when there's available overnight shelter, or it presents a public health and safety risk regardless of shelter availability. It prohibits sleeping in a vehicle between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. on all public property. It also enforces erection and construction of tents to be laid down and taken down during daylight hours. That cannot be constructed during 8 a.m. to sunset. That's the most limiting portion of that. But what that does is it eliminates the overtness and the structures being placed on sidewalks, and you have these remnants left all over the place that those have to be removed according to this ordinance. So again, in the public property ordinance under section C, you have those 4 components from least limiting to most limiting. That's what we're proposing is the most limiting factor there to address several of the layers of issues that the city's encountering right now with unsheltered homelessness. In addition to this, in section D, the unlawful camping on private property is not as arrayed as the public property portion of the ordinance. The public, you can kind of layer it out, but in our recommendation as staff on the private property, we suggest that the components that are there now remain in place, all kind of the all or none component. The person camping on their own property, well, let me back up for a second. Camping on private property would be prohibited unless the persons are camping upon their own land, the person's camping with the written consent of the landowner, or the person's camping no more than 7 consecutive days without an interruption of 3 months of non-camping days. And what that means is if they had written consent to camp on a property that was privately owned, they could camp for 7 consecutive days. After that 7 consecutive days, they could not camp on that site again for 90 days. So it prohibits a passive encampment on private property. So that's the overarching portion of the ordinance structure. There is a series of definitions within this ordinance that layers a lot of components that don't exist in our current ordinance to define unsheltered. Available overnight shelter, camping, structures. The list is there on the first page, but it's pretty lengthy. And there's an excellent purpose statement at the beginning to really highlight all of the aspects of what we're working on as staff to go. That kind of covers the summary of the ordinance. At this time, I'd like to know if council has any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brooke. Do we have a comment from Councilmember Kinston? Question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. One of the questions that I previously had was, that I had some concern about was the amount of services that are available. So, in doing this review, I want to know if you can tell me how many shelter, because it mentions that if there is shelter available. So my question is for men separately, women separately, women and children separately, and men with children. What are the resources available when it says there's no camping overnight if there's shelter available? Is there available for each one of these categories?
So in the city, there is availability. There are beds that exist for those 4 categories of persons that you spoke to. Whether or not they're available at that moment, that depends on that moment. I don't know that exact rate at this time, and I don't have the numbers quantified to be able to explain what those numbers look like. But I would like to say that on average, our current services, the Salvation Army and the Hope Center, are never at capacity, and quite often less than 50% at capacity.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you. Mr. Redding, I'm going to ask you to step aside for a second. I'm going to ask somebody from the police department to come up, and these questions are going to be for them and the Madam Attorney. Starting with public property, and we're looking at the most limiting, which is what I believe you all recommended. When this came up, much like Councilmember Kingston, I was going to that monopoly board, and I stated every place I looked, it was a go to jail card. And so when I think it was mentioned, in the event there's shelter available or not, it'll still be prohibited. What are those next steps from your department?
So I'm trying to understand the question, Councilwoman Ingram. You're asking me specifically, what would we do if there's no shelter available?
Correct.
Okay. Much of this has to do with education both internally within the police department as well as with the community that we're dealing with. It's not illegal to be homeless. So what we would have to do is build up that partnership. We currently have Ms. Deanna Braggs, who is working within the Fayetteville Police Department to build those relationships. We also have Officer Stacy Sanders, who is building those relationships. We work closely with Salvation Army. We are currently transporting people who wish to be in shelters from their location to the Salvation Army. So we would continue that process. Where we would go with as the ordinance goes is where the council would want us to go. We would have to get direction from the council and from the attorney's office to see what direction they would want us to travel with that. Again, it's not illegal to be homeless. We are more than willing to fix the problem as opposed to try to arrest the problem.
Thank you. And then as a added on to that, before we go to private property, in the event that we take individuals to Salvation Army and the Dream Center on Person Street, and they all reach capacity, correct? Is there something that allows them to stay? And I'm not even going to talk about the Dream Center because that is a very small parking lot. Salvation Army is in the event that they are at capacity. Do you know, Madam Attorney, or in this instance, Brooke or yourself, do we know that they could stay in the parking lot if they are in a vehicle, however, to be at least safe and not have to be detained?
So as far as the police department goes, and Brooke, you can jump in, we cannot dictate what Salvation Army does on their property. And that is their property to manage. And if they have people on their property and they allow that, then that's Salvation Army's regulations. That's nothing that the Fayetteville Police Department has any say-so in it.
And to dovetail on that, ma'am, there's kind of two components that, because it's private property, under this ordinance at its maximum, they would be required to have written consent, and Salvation Army could let that happen on private property.
Thank you.
I would also like to answer a little bit more deeper into what you had asked, Chief, at the beginning. Was you had said if they're at capacity, if there's no capacity or available beds whatsoever, well, then the ordinance is moot, and it's unenforceable at that point based off the structure and the first line in Section 1 of Section C.
Okay. Okay. I just was hearing the either or. So going to private property, something that Councilmember Kingston brought up when this initially came up was the piece of all sometimes people have is their cars. And it says there's no sleeping in vehicles on private property. And that may be a bit concerning because somebody may have a job, but they just cannot afford shelter, but they have their car. And so I want to, so of course I'm hearing they can have that approval of the private property owner, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Ingram. Ms. Redden, I know you've worked on this, and council, this has been an issue. It is an issue statewide where cities are dealing with that, and certainly we want to balance being sensitive to those in our community that are in this situation to have some structure with the public good. If you look at all of the shelters that we support, they have certain rules and barriers for people to get in, no drinking drugs for that particular night. So this, by us looking the other way and not doing anything, really is circumventing the effectiveness of those shelters because it gives people an option who don't want to comply with some of that. Now, of course, we know that nothing we can do tonight or even follow-up is going to be a one-all fix-all. But I think if we continue to look the other way, these communities are growing. Charlotte had a situation where the council didn't take any action until it got to be so bad that there were, rats and other things there, and they had over 200 people they had to try to get to help just because they let it kind of fester. So I think putting some structure with it, hopefully, I know Brooke has put in a lot of work. I do agree that maybe not some of the strenuous rules about all of it. Private property, I think, you have to be careful there, but the public space that is being used for camping, we are one of the few cities outside that don't have any type of public camping ordinance or very limited ordinance compared to our peers. Even Asheville, which is very, permissive to a lot of these kinds of things, has more onerous ordinances. So hope we'll consider that tonight. Brooke, I know you put in a lot of work, but council, we will need some direction because as we have this conversation with DOT, they want to know, pretty much what the will or the consensus of the council is as they look to give us some more provisions to pilot this stuff. But we know that looking the other way, we've done that, and it's only growing from that point. So hopefully we'll consider that tonight. May not have all the answers to it, but I hope that there'll be some consensus to move this to a point where he can continue having a conversation with DOT.
Mr. Mayor, if we could, to that end, Brooke, could you put back the continuum? No, down, right there, the public property, that one, yeah. And because you could, yeah, all three, thank you. And so, Mayor, as you said, really looking to see how far, how little you guys would like to move up or down. The distinction that Councilmember Ingram made is a good one, that I would tell you what this really does is the second bullet in each one of those columns. If it presents a public health and safety risk regardless of shelter availability, that is what would allow us to be able to go into some of these situations like we saw, that where people are close to the road and we have offered them services repeatedly. That was what would help us when we have people who are risking their life and other people's lives by living under a bridge, starting fires under a bridge. That, again, it's not saying that they like can't camp, but that becomes a risk for themselves or the public, and they would have to move from that location. And if they did not, then this would give us the tools to do that. That's just that threat, or I always mix that up, reduction.
Risk assessment, sir.
Risk assessment piece. That's the most important component, and what makes this very interesting to NCDOT as well, is that it's just not a one-size-fits-all, as Councilman Ingram said, where you either move or you go to jail. It is, you have to move from this location because this is dangerous to you, it is dangerous to the public, and that is what makes this proposal so interesting. But it would help us if we're moving forward with NCDOT. I think you had a conversation, you said even this week or today?
Last week, sir.
Last week with them, and we're just looking for any direction that y'all would like to provide.
All right, we go to Councilman Banks McLaughlin, then Mayor Pro Tem, and then we'll circle back to council for that.
Thank you, Mayor. My opinion with this is that I believe right now it's immature to have this discussion knowing that there is a limit of resources, limited of sheltering. I think that it's probably best that we probably bring this up at another time once we find out what the county is doing as far as providing or the location and building a homeless shelter, because where would the individuals go? So that's my concern, is that we already know that they're unsheltered. There's a limited of shelter locations. So I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to put that out there, that I think right now is not a good time to have that conversation, knowing that there's not enough sheltering right now.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to ask this question, and just to make sure that I've got it straight in my head. So the prohibiting of sleeping in a vehicle between 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. on public property. So let's say that goes and they end up on private property. So at one point, a parking lot in a shopping center can have people sleeping in their cars without the owner of the property knowing that. So who is going to be able to say if the owner calls up and says, okay, I've got people in my shopping center parking lot sleeping overnight, will the police come out and tell them to move? Or are they going to ask for a note? Or is it just at the will of the owner of the private property? And I think I tried to read through it. I just want to make sure that I've got it in my head, that I heard about the 7 days they have permission.
So under the ordinance, with council's adoption at its current array, the enforcement does have penalties that fall under General Statute 14-4 from the state, with a $500 fine for that occurrence, should it be enforced or should they refuse to be displaced or leave. But the police would enforce that. Is it an adoptable ordinance? If a private property owner said, hey, I have a person that's camping in a vehicle on my property, I need you to help me get them removed. With this law in place, the police would be able to adjudicate and enforce that.
Okay, I understand. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if the businesses are closed and people are there and you don't know and something happens, am I making any sense?
So essentially, Mr. Redding is quoting trespassing. And we cannot do that without the property owner being there present, telling the person they have to leave. Then we give them every opportunity to leave. And when they flat out refuse to leave somebody's property, then they're charged criminally. We're not even looking at the ordinance. They're now violating North Carolina general statute.
Okay, so, and I'm going to leave it at that, but I feel like I need to say this. I leave my business at 6 o'clock at night. Behind my building can be 12 cars of people sleeping on private property, not allowed on public property, but allowed on private property, not allowed. But if I come back and I open my store up at 9, who's to say that it becomes a habit, is what I'm saying, and then if something happens, who is held liable for it? If something happens, the property owner is liable for it.
And we currently have in place well over 200 trespassing agreements where property owners have entered into an agreement with the city of Fayetteville, with the police department, to say after hours, people are not to be on my property, both public, on all types of private property. And we periodically, when called there or need to be there, we will go and enforce the trespassing. And then we will subpoena the property owner to say, you did not give this person the right to be there. We have that within city property. We also have that on private property. That is essentially what we do for parks at night. It's a trespassing agreement. You cannot be here after hours. It's closed. You, as the property owner, when you leave, you're essentially saying that you give the authority to the police department to go by there and to enforce. Nobody should be on your property after hours. And we have, it's basically a contract that is entered in with the magistrate's office, and there's several hundred of them throughout the city.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
All right. So council need to give a little direction to Mr. Brooks so that he can continue working with DOT. So I guess we will just start it. If there's a consensus for item number 1, we'll get a show of hands, and we'll go to 2 and 3 if necessary. All right. Can we get a consensus if there is a consensus for the least limiting, which would be the first option? Those in favor of that, show of hands? Least, yeah, the one to the far left, the least. That would be, there is overnight, prohibition of overnight shelter, and that if it presents public health and safety risks.
And this is in favor?
Yes.
Oh.
All right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay. All right. Those opposed to that? Let's see. 1, 2. Okay. All right. So I think we have a consensus for the least. All right. Did you need anything else, Mr. Manager? Well, I think there was sufficient support. Did you, council, was there any interest in going further?
Private property. Do we need to vote on private property? Not really, right?
The lease didn't have the private property component, did it? This is all public, so we just need to do the same, whatever, if there's any choices on private.
Yes, sir. And so the sleeping on vehicles and the moderately limiting, again, this can go all the way up to most limiting, but this would potentially address where you see people, some in the downtown, parking in your parking lots and parking, sleeping overnight.
That's public property, isn't it?
This, we're discussing.
Yeah, no, I think we've agreed to the, oh, you're talking about to the next, to the moderately limited. Okay. All right, so council, you had a question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
So talking about the
Your mic. Turn your mic on.
So with the moderately limited, going back to sleeping in the cars, this, if we do the least, it is saying that people can sleep in their cars wherever.
It would not change the current ordinance structure. And so they would be allowed to do that, and we would not have an ordinance or a law enforceable to prevent that action, yes.
Thank you.
On public property.
Councilmember Banks McLaughlin.
Okay, thank you. If I'm reading this right, it say, least limiting camping on public property is prohibited when there is available overnight shelter, which there's a shortage of overnight sheltering, correct? So that's saying right now that they're able to sleep in public,
I
correct?
know that it is a shortage, so I guess that is if they've checked the various options and they said that we're full. Is that how that interprets?
Yes, so the first line on the print off, when an overnight shelter is available, it is unlawful upon any city property, including, and then it lists out all the different types of public property to camp. That's that first line. What that's saying is, in our instance, Salvation Army and the Hope, the Man of Dreams Center, those components, if they're at maximum capacity, this ordinance is unenforceable. However, we are quite often nowhere near capacity, nowhere near filled. Individuals are choosing to not go into the service array.
from my understanding, we have been maxed from the from the conversations I've had, but
Okay, so that's an easy enough matrix to verify.
Yes,
case
sir.
by
And
case.
so that first component, that least limiting, would define those first two sections. The when available overnight shelter is available, and then that second piece of any encampment on publicly owned property within the city that is deemed high risk to the public's health and safety will be posted no trespass, removed and cleaned. So we're asking, and what we're saying is, if there's available overnight shelter, then please go to a shelter to get assistance.
So on any given night, if a call is made and Salvation says, I have 3 beds, then it is enforceable in that case?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In addition to that, if there isn't available shelter and it's in one of these higher risk encampments that you see arrayed across some of the highway systems and the major thoroughfares in the city, using our process we built, that can then be adjudicated and we can engage and use the process under the impact reduction program, which we spoke about previously.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ingram, then Kinston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's one thing I would maybe like us to consider with the consensus we've gathered. Going back to Salvation Army, looking at there being an opportunity for a safe location for them to be in the event Salvation Army is at max capacity. Once again, they do have a large parking lot. They do have a lot of land around them. So I would like to see, if possible, we could gather consensus to entertain a conversation, to enter in maybe not even agreement, or however that conversation would go, to see if they would be amenable to accepting something like that. If they are at capacity for beds, then at least allowing a portion of the parking lot for there to be some type of safe space, so that they're all in one location for that time frame of whatever is being proposed. And this will be something that they would say what they would be comfortable to working in. They have a very large fenced-in backyard area to the side and a large parking lot, but I would be interested in at least having the conversation to see what they are open to. Because one thing I am recognizing, somebody sleeping in their car is far better than somebody sleeping in our tent near a street. And so if we can at least have that conversation surrounding that, I think that gets us even further.
So just to make sure I'm clear, you're saying in addition to the consensus motion for the one we choose to authorize Mr. Redding to have a conversation with Salvation Army? Because it would be up to them to do that or not. Okay, all right.
To be amenable to say, all right, if you are at capacity, can these individuals come sleep in their car, or, whatever is up, they are amenable to do.
I understand, ma'am, and we are in discussion with all of the service providers in the COC. Salvation Army is part of that entity, and those conversations are consistently had of other ways to solve or provide opportunities for our unsheltered community, and we'll make sure that we broach that and solicit that idea. But again, as the mayor said, they're an individual nonprofit. We can ask and have those conversations, and they are working with us quite often and frequently. So
Yeah, I just want to make the direct ask and see where it goes. Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilmember Kinston.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to go back and revisit the question that I asked about the 4 categories. So you're saying that if there is capacity, if there's not capacity, then of course, then they have a place to go. But my question is, if you have availability for a male, but not the children that is with the male. So it still leaves a gap area there, because you're saying they may have capacity for one, but not the other.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question and a great point to bring up, because there are 475 plus unsheltered homeless in the city. That's thousands of different problems and solutions to deal with. And in several cases, some of them have small children, or they come from a battered, abused, environments, and they're women trying to flee. And so the circumstances that surround each individual encampment are triaged in the process that we're recommending. What this ordinance does is it gives us the legal basis needed that in the event that we can't adjust or something's high risk, we can then, use that law to push the elements and address the high risk component of it. But the city's not in the process of going to every encampment and telling them that they have to leave. We're not trying to get in that business right now. We understand there's a limit to the services in the city. We understand that our service providers, the COC and all of their members, are struggling and working actively to collect funds and increase their service capacity. What we're really speaking to here with the ordinance is to, one, level the field and create a legal basis for us to adjudicate if needed, and two, implement and work on the policy and protocol that we established or are willing to test with our peers and our sister and brother agencies, and ultimately address the high-risk encampments in the city to protect the public's health and safety. And as we do that process, under this ordinance, from least limiting to maximum limiting, we're actually creating a system that's driving our unsheltered homeless towards services, and if they don't want to participate in those services, they don't have to. But if they're in an environment that's at risk or at risk to the public, at high risk, they can't be there. And that's what this is really speaking to. Does that answer your question?
It does, and Mayor and Council, I would just like to go back to the conversation that we had previously, that everyone that's in their car may be in a temporary situation. It's not always a complete homeless situation. It may be because of, unable to find housing. So that is my concern, so thank you.
Well, yeah, and I had some concerns too about, if I'm a truck driver and I want to pull over and take a nap or something, on a public property. So that's why I think the least allowed us at least to give DOT at least some insight as to that we were, as a council, looking to address this. But I think the discussion should go further. As Councilmember Ingram suggested with the Salvation Army and the other partners, Councilmember Banks, McLaughlin, I know had mentioned that at one time, to give Mr. Brooke Redding the opportunity to do that in parallel to being able to tell at least DOT that the council has made some action in cleaning up its camping ordinance again. So, Council, so I think, Mr. Redding, do you have what you need? Mr. Hewitt, you have what you need from us? There was a consensus for that. I don't know if the moderate or the other more strenuous one was had the support it needed at this time, but I know at least there was a consensus for the first option.
This is quite well.
Okay.
I have one additional component there, sir, was on the private property component. Does the council want that brought back to them in structure with the least limiting of the public property component? Or do you want to keep that separate for, what's council's choice at this time, sir?
Well, I think there were questions on that. So this, I know you needed for the conversation with DOT, not so much the private, but certainly I think there's interest to hear about the, so that we can analyze the pros and cons of the private discussion as well.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So are you
Councilmember?
saying he's going to bring that back with the
private,
breakdown?
The private
Oh,
property.
right, okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I was tracking. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
And Mayor, so what that looks like is we will prep this portion for adoption at an upcoming meeting. And we will also bring you back the additional information you requested from Salvation Army and on the private property component.
All right. So, council, let's take a few-minute recess. I know they had brought some refreshments next door, so we'll take about a 15-minute break. All right, we'll call our meeting back to order. Item 4.05, Parks and Rec Project Report Card. I thought we just had one of these, Mr. Manager.
If you'd like, Mayor, for the interest of time, we can either ask questions of Michael or we can pivot, but.
Yeah, I thought we just had a presentation with this. Michael, you just like to talk to us?
No, sir. No, sir. Depending on what the conversation is about, sir. But I agree. We can. Thank you for Mayor, Council, for letting us come up and talk about this. I think the biggest points that we want to make to you is that the process is moving forward. We got some. We just opened up the new splash pad at Lake Rim, and people seeming to love that. I think we broke ground over at Senior Citizen East. The conversation with the military with the sports complex is going tremendously well. The tennis center, which is going to be one of the signature projects, that one's given us a little bit of ups and downs in the industry because the world of tennis is busy and everybody's building. So finding somebody to help us build the tennis courts. That's a conversation that we're constantly having with staff and the project managers there. The notice to proceed to go ahead and get the place ready to receive the building, the tennis courts. That's been approved by council and that's moving forward. So we just wanted to make sure and constantly updating. I think one of the biggest things that we want to do though is make sure that we come back and talk about the Cape Fear River Park and the new ideas that we have for Veterans Park 2. We want to make sure that we get your input on those two projects. One is a bond project, one is not. But we want to make sure that we get that total input because we think we got some exciting designs for both of them. So that would be an updated report to get everybody sort of brought up to speed. If there's any questions, I'll go ahead and answer them now.
Yes. All right. Couple questions. Councilmember Dawkins, and then Hare, and then Councilmember Wright asked about the approximate ribbon cutting date of Senior West.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a quick comment, and thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Mayor, I think we need to hold off for 2 or 3 weeks till the new council gets set, because they're going to be drinking from a fire hose, and just on all these projects we have going with parks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Hare.
Yes, sir. Mr. Director, as you were talking, you was pointing out certain little priority ones and this and that, and I was just waiting, and you never did say anything about what is the lake? What is it? Greenville Lake?
Glenville Lake.
Glenville Lake. Yes, I didn't hear you say anything. I saw it on in the report. I was just wanting to hear about that little decking and cut through I'm still waiting on that. I know you said that the last time that you were forced that we were getting the contractor and talking about the plans and the drawings and where the entrance and access would be. And are we any further?
No, sir.
I just gave that report then, didn't I?
I think one of the things that there's going to be opportunity.
I mean, I knew it's relatively new. It's probably the last project I think
of. And we don't have the actual funding, but there's going to be a request that we're going to come back with, and we just need to make sure that the manager is comfortable with how we go about making that happen.
Wow, who's comfortable? The council? Did you say that?
No, sir, the manager. Before I come to council, I got to talk to the manager first. But anyway.
He'll be comfortable if we're comfortable.
Okay.
But I understand.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, sir, you walked right into that.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
When you said I felt bad when you said that.
Oh, my goodness. But anyway, we're going to come back.
It's coming back, though.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Council, any other questions?
I
Councilmember Wright.
still needed to know the estimated time of date for the ribbon cutting.
Right now, this morning when we went out there at the Bill Chris Centers is what the Councilmember Wright is asking about. Furniture was delivered today. the pool is coming along nicely, irrigation is coming along nicely. I would say probably by the end of this week, we would come back to the manager and probably be able to give a definite date where he would be comfortable for us presenting that. But this morning, everybody working just as hard as we can. When we saw the furniture pull up, the weight equipment will be coming in this Friday for the weight room. So everything's moving well. So if y'all would give us an opportunity by the end of this week, we'll have a great day.
Well, thank you. I knew it was close. You guys doing a great job out there.
Thank
and I know it's coming together. Thank you.
The center over by the hospital that was being.
Gilmore.
Yeah, where are we with that?
That's they finished the interior work. We're doing some redesigning interior work. All the steel and the equipment to go ahead and enlarge that is there. The progress on that is going real well. The contractor is there. So I would think probably in the next 90 days, you should see steel going in the air.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you basically the same thing that I asked Ms. Ball. I would like for you to put in your head that I think that it would be great if we could have the ribbon cutting for the Billcrest Center probably sometime next week. I know that we have delivered furniture, but I know that we are close and maybe do a soft opening. I know that, that was our big project, and Mr. Crisp started that project with Councilmember Wright and I. So I would appreciate if you could kind of maybe put that in your head that we could get that done before maybe the 10th.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. If the environment is applicable, I know I rode out there about 2 weeks ago, went to Beauty Spot Church, and it was still a lot of construction debris in the front. So.
Oh, you need to go back.
Okay, good. That's fantastic. All right. Council, any other questions? Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you. I recognize this is a update. I'll go to the next question. I'll leave that one alone. But for the makerspace, can you give just a brief update on where we are with that and moving that along?
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. We had abbreviated tours for council members to get comfortable with what that facility might look like, what the risk factor is in a flooding situation. It seemed to look like the council members that went were comfortable. So we have that on our report card with Brooke and the funding. And we're just waiting to get those monies in place. And then we would go ahead and get started on designing and building and adding that. And one of the biggest things is it's a gateway.
Right.
Whether you're going into the city or whether you're going out of the city or into the Murchison Road corridor, it can't stay the way it is.
Right.
So when we come to that happy medium, we'll bring that design back to council because Veterans Park across the street is going to be a nice place to be. So that whole environment, having what it looks like for our downtown area into the Murchison Road would be something that we need to get done.
Okay, going into my next two, and then I'll be done. The Veterans Park Phase 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are we on that?
We're in a great place.
Okay, good. That's all I need to know. We're in a great place, everybody.
Good.
And then finally,
Can you let him answer that question?
Okay.
Other than a great pace.
Well, when we first started, there was the funding that we had only allowed us to do what we call a third phase. And that was just green space, get it looking good, nice walkways, section in it to where you had that contiguous access to Veterans Park 1. But one of the things that we did have is we had a phase 1 and a phase 2. So this council asked us to go ahead and bring back what a great park would look like. So our architectural firm went on and did that. And I think once you see the ideas that come back, because we wanted to embody some of the stuff that the ASOM wanted to do with the mess hall, with the chapel, with the triple nickel, those features and the ideas that come from people who get paid to do these kinds of things, they make you dream well. So I think when we bring those back to this council, I think you're going to see an opportunity to do a great thing and have a destination park for our veterans across the country and veterans, particularly this state, that we'll need your approval on for us to move forward on that. So when I say great place, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Just trying to get more so timeline. I mean, that's.
Well, we want to come back September for the work session.
All right.
Thank you. And then my final piece is, while I don't see it on here, I know it's tied to another. So I guess I can give part of this update, help you out.
Go ahead.
The Maple C. Smith Park is moving along pretty fast than expected. After that, they will then move to Walker Spivey. But I do want to point out something, and maybe you can just plus one it. We had to get, and because the splash pad was so old at Walker Spivey, we had to get it inspected to see if we could turn it on so they could have something for the next couple of weeks before they start renovation. One of the things I do want to point out is, and this is just to future councils or, your department, I don't want to ever, and I'm not just speaking for my district, I don't ever want to get to a place where something gets so old to where it's an endangerment to have to. So I think we should do a better job on our end and staff-wise to make sure that city amenities are enjoyable city amenities, and children, especially communities that have children and good turnover of children, are not going without as it relates to our city amenities. Thank you.
I appreciate that too.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Gibson? So, do understand that some of the site control from DOT for the Veteran Park too, that's an issue? So that's
No, Rob Stone, who is our resident DOT expert.
Mr. Stone, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing fine, Mayor. Yes, we've been having conversations with DOT for a little while. They were having some issues trying to figure out how that property was originally acquired, and they're working through that. Last conversation I had with the division engineer, Mr. Drew Cox, he was hoping it would be in front of the Board of Transportation this week, as a matter of fact, for them. And so once that's approved, it comes back to us and to you to accept that property.
Okay.
But there was some questions about that, so really we're very close. Been working on with them very, very closely for the last year, and even longer than that since Mike's been working on them for a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys, for the update.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Yes, sir.
All right, council, item 4.06, home occupation standards, chapter 30, code amendment.
They are.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hello. Let me get this pulled up here. Yes. Good evening. I'm James Rutherford. I'm Housing and Code Enforcement Division Manager. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. Before you, we have some information that was requested at the last time this came before Council back in March, referencing home occupation standards. The City Council asked that we come back to them with some new standards as they refer to 3 specific areas. There are currently 11 homes occupation standards. These would be 3 additional standards that would be added. They were adding limitations on the maximum number of customers permitted to be present at any time at a home occupation. Adding limitations on the maximum number of customer vehicles that could be parked at the home occupation's location at any time, and adding limitations on the hours of operation for the home occupation. So the first change, and the mayor wanted some additional background as it referred with our peer cities. 5 of the 11 peer cities we looked at have limitations on the maximum number of customers. Durham, Gastonia, Greensboro, Raleigh, and Winston-Salem. The proposed text amendment would request that there only be a maximum of blank customers, patrons, or clients at the home occupation. We're proposing a maximum of 6. We're looking for direction from council. The second requested change are adding limitations on the maximum number of customers and customer vehicles that can be parked at the home occupation at any one time. Right now, there's only one peer city that has this standard, and that's Charlotte. They limit to only 2 vehicles. So Fayetteville would propose a maximum number of vehicles. We're proposing 3. And then the third change is adding limitations on the hours of operation. 2 of the 11 peer cities we have standards, Charlotte and Gastonia. Charlotte is 7 to 8 p.m. and Gastonia is 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Fayetteville, once again, would mirror this standard and have a limitation. We're proposing 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And just going through the current 11 standards and what additional tweaking and modifying we did just to update the ordinance and to bring it into more alignment with current times. Standard number 1 talks about the business being located within the dwelling and only 20% or 600 square feet. It also limits the number of home occupations to 1. 3 of the 11 peer cities have limitations that it only be 1. So we suggested that they split the standard into 2 parts, 1 and 2, that we take out the limitation of 1 and we keep the space limitation at 20% or 600 square feet, which is very stringent compared to the other peer cities. Current standard 2, principal persons providing the service reside at the dwelling. We're pretty much keeping that the same. Standard 3, home occupation employs no more than 1 person on the premises who does not reside there, keeping that the same. Home occupation causes no change in external appearance. We added temporary or permanent changes to strengthen that standard. This is an area where there's a little bit of tweaking. All vehicles used in conjunction with the home occupation are sized and located on the premise in such a manner as not to disrupt the quiet nature and visual quality of the neighborhood. We maintain that, but the size limit for the vehicles was set at 10,000 pounds. That's the gross vehicle weight rating. We propose that we would take it to the standard that's already in the residential parking standards in the city's code, which is 30-5A5, which is 13,000 pounds. So that's more consistent with our existing code in other sections. So that means if the home occupation has a vehicle that's they use for the purposes of the home occupation, let's say it's they're running some type of contracting business and it's a van and it's Joe's Contracting, that van could come home, they could operate the business operations out of the office in the house. So that would be the vehicle that would be limited to 13,000 instead of 10. Current standard 6 shall not result in regular and ongoing vehicular traffic. The proposal is to take this standard out because in the new standards 6, 7, and 8, 6 we just talked about, it would address vehicles coming and going, parking, how many can be there and where they can be. So that would really put a hard standard on what regular and ongoing traffic means. Without that standard, it's hard to enforce what regular or ongoing traffic means or what it looks like. So for the parking area, we propose that we make sure that they have off-street parking that complies with 30-5A5, which is the current city code, and that it shall be provided and that it must be utilized, which means it must be utilized. They have to park their patrons' cars there, their employees' cars, and their home occupation vehicles per that existing city code. The number of off-street parking spaces utilized must be provided and maintained per the code. Section 8, the current, there'll be no advertising devices. We kept that basically the same, but we actually pulled the part out of the code that's most relevant, and that is the 2 square feet maximum size for any sign that's displayed at a residential property that has a home occupation. Current Code 9 and 10, there are no changes. They're just renumbered. Deal with the outdoor storage of goods and the retail sales of goods. Don't take place on the premises, so there'd be no changes with those codes, just renumbered. 11, the home occupation does not create, once again, traffic or parking congestion, things that are difficult to define. So that's where the standards in 6, 7, and 8 pretty much handle that and take care of that. So it limits where the cars can be, how many can be there, and eventually here, when we get to the new stuff, it'll say what time they can come and go. And the new standards are here proposed. They're number 8, be a maximum number of blank customer vehicles, a maximum number of patrons, clients, or customers in number 9, and then the hours of operation from whatever time to whatever time the council agrees to go with. So our options are to move forward with the proposed text amendments, direct us to take it to the Planning Commission, and then we'll return it to council for council's action, or propose to modify those text amendments, take no action, or table the issue for a later time. And we propose option 1. City Council moves to accept the proposed text amendments and direct us to take it to Planning Commission so we can bring it back to you.
All right, do have a couple of questions. Have Councilmember Hare and then Dawkins.
Mr. Rutherford, thank you for this. This has been a concern over the years. Is this going to be any relationship, this ordinance, depending on which way we go, with the concern that, because I didn't see it in here, so is it going to be anything related to the request that I brought about trucks and tractors and large vehicles and boats and things along that line? I know that's a piece you're working on too.
Yes, we've done the research for that. We have I think a report that should be coming to council at the next meeting. That's my understanding. Okay. It ties directly to it in the fact that it's utilizing and directly referencing in the proposed changes. It's saying we're now going to go with 30-5A5, which is the parking standards for residential. So if that gets changed,
I can wait.
So if that gets changed, then this will roll right into home occupation.
Okay, right. So I can wait for that report. I know that they're closely related, and I was saying, okay, so I can wait for that. But
Yes,
what my other concern was, I receive calls occasionally. I have gone by the residents' homes, and I have seen a business which they run out of their home, which I understand that. I'll pull my business truck sometimes out of my yard, so I'm together with that. But in the evening, you have 5, I think I counted 5 the other day, and their big names are on the truck, the vans, pull right into the house. Is that a part of what you're covering tonight? Because I did see, you said blank, so I think you were looking for counsel.
That situation would already be covered as a code violation, either as a home occupation violation in the 2 vehicles, or as prohibited use for storage of commercial vehicles on
So that's
residential.
already there.
It's already there. We just need to
And
know
if
about
the-
it or
So if a
detect it
res-
or it be reported to us. We could handle that right
Okay.
now.
You answered my question. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Rutherford, JR. You've worked months on this. Thank you, Dr. Newton, also. But you and I have been involved, and you put up with my rant and raving, and I appreciate it. I do have one question, and then I want to make some recommendations, Mr. Mayor, for the council to consider. I'm concerned about the confines of the home. For instance, now that I brought this up, other people have called me and said, well, have you gone and looked at the car wrapping business on Morganton Road across from Fayetteville Academy? So I rode by there. And this guy's wrapping cars out in his driveway, in his side yard, and in his garage. So in a home-based business, are they confined to the actual home of, for instance, like garage, or can they do their business, their customers can work out in their front yard or their driveway or their entire property? Maybe it's in the backyard.
The current code, I have it pulled up. I don't know if you can see what my screen
thank you.
shows. It says the business or service is located within the
The
dwelling. Our proposal says all activities related to the business or services are conducted inside the principal structure
All
or
right.
accessory structure.
Okay.
So that would further strengthen that and leave no gray area for that to be
All right.
taking place.
So if a customer of a gym is working out in the driveway, then pushing one of those sleds or whatever that I see them push, that would not be an approved item in this particular ordinance.
It
Because
shouldn't,
it's
it
with-
shouldn't be, but once again, that's probably a clear-cut example. But if someone's just out there doing calisthenics or running, or it'd be hard to tie that to what they're doing inside the building.
Yeah, these are commercial
Yes.
customers.
Oh,
These
yes.
are not residents
Yes, sir.
working out.
Yeah.
And then the fellow wrapping the cars. I mean, and the cars are beautiful that he wraps. I'm impressed, but he's wrapping them outside his garage.
Is it? Okay.
So that would not be an appropriate use according to the ordinance.
It shouldn't be happening now, but it's not super clear with the proposed. It'd be crystal clear that they can't do any of the home occupation activities outside the
Right.
structure.
Because normally with a hairstylist, you don't see them styling hair out in their garage or in their driveway or in their front yard.
And we're aware of the car wrapping guy. He has like a gray van and
That's right.
and a Lamborghini.
He
So,
has
yeah,
a Lamborghini.
He does. Yeah.
Woo.
It's green or orange or something. So,
I think it's green.
yes. So, yeah, we're aware of him. We haven't caught him outside wrapping cars. You may because you
Yeah,
that's
well,
your area of
I
town.
ride by there because it kind of
Yeah.
works in my
But,
daily routine.
But we haven't caught him in the act.
Well, and I'm told I can't take pictures. I mean, I seem to be there at the right time. So can I take pictures and Madam McDonald, city attorney, would they be acceptable in a court of law?
Well, we're gonna kind of steer back, so I know,
Well, I mean, I need guidance because he's never there when it's happening, and I seem to be. So that's.
Madam Attorney, you have a legal answer for that?
I can email her and then email the council. All right, I'll do that. Thank you. Well, I just want to say neighborhoods are zoned residential to promote families, not businesses. So that's what I'm trying to get to, Mr. Mayor. I like their proposals. I would prefer a max of 2 vehicles, but now do you count the customer vehicles that are parked in other people's yards that are using the same business?
Well, you would have to go with what's at that home occupation location. So.
Okay, so if it's 2 at his and 2 at his neighbor's.
Or if they park next door, or
Right.
if they park 5 houses down,
Right.
or if they parked at the mall and took an Uber there. I mean,
Yes.
it's
Okay.
It's where do you draw the line?
I got you. I get it. I mean, he's got friends, and that's great, and they park in his friends' driveways. All right, Mr. Mayor, I'll be ready to make some proposals once other members have had a chance. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rutherford.
Yeah, I'll circle back to you. Councilmember Hare for the next round.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Rutherford, tell me the mechanical issue that I hear a lot from my Summer Hill community. Is this what's going to be brought back to us in September also? Then I won't get into the conversation of the mechanic shop.
They're not permitted at this point right now. It's specifically prohibited in the definition of home occupations. But you have to be able to demonstrate that that activity is going on.
Yeah, and that seems to be the problem is
Yeah.
when zone enforcement.
If we go to a house and we see cars dismantled, parts laying around, tools, workers there, it's we've caught people who do advertising on Facebook and Marketplace. We've caught people doing stuff that way.
Okay. Well, I'll just wait for September then, and whenever when you're going to be bringing that, because those are some strong issues that I brought. Okay, thank you,
All
you,
right,
Mayor.
Councilmember Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to say for the record, I have no intention on supporting this. I think we were mentioned in an article as being one of the with the highest percentage for small business owners, and majority of those business owners do have work at home jobs or run their businesses from home. And given where we are with inflation, I think it's a bit unfair to put these limits on these businesses while they're trying to maintain a roof over their heads. So I have no intention on supporting this. I do thank you for the report that you've given, but as we look towards trying to find some type of balance, I would be open to that. But the way it is now, I cannot support it, because what we are now doing is we are potentially adding to the issues we see surrounding poverty, inflation, and people being able to keep roofs over their heads and feed their families. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ingram. So the proposals, is there a good, better, best in this? Mr. Rutherford, I know you covered a lot, and there was, some fill in the blanks, but right now, if you had to assess where we are, there's not a lot of regulation in this space, is what you're saying.
Correct. We would basically just need, if the council consensus is to move forward with taking these to planning commission and coming back.
So the planning commission will work through the details, and I see some of your proposals are, give a little bit more leniency than the examples you used. Like one of them had a number of 5, but your proposal was recommended 6.
Correct. It'd be 3 vehicles, 6 customers, and 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So if you wanted something to come back to you that's different than that, then we can, if the council consensus is to change those or modify those numbers, we can do that.
Okay. All right, Councilman Wright.
So it's very broad, and then it can be very narrow, because we haven't talked about the type of businesses. We refer to some type of business as hair, blah, 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 but there are many, many types of business that may require operation after 8, per se, depending on what they're doing. It could be administrative, they could be computerized technology that's working in the evening times, it could be shift work, it could be many, many other things. So if you narrow it down to a point where, just cut and dry 8 to 8, then I think we might need to relook it to give it a more broader perspective. But at the same time, we don't want our city, trash with people working in their business, leaving parts outside. The image I think is mostly, and the traffic is mostly what we're at. But I think we need to look a little deeper.
Okay, so the proposed focuses on the customers that are visiting and conducting business or receiving services, not the other parts of the home occupation. So basically, it would say you can have your customers come visit you to get your therapy or your music lessons or your physical training or whatever service you're going to give them, between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. If you want to work from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next morning, doing paperwork or doing social media or being on the computer, that would not be covered by that part of the code.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rutherford, if you would kind of put your that sheet of what staff is right. There's like 3 things on it. There it was, option 1, 2. Moves accept pros, text, staff, present the changes. Mr. Mayor asks for a consensus motion on option number 1, that the council move to accept the proposed code text amendments, direct staff to present the changes at the next available planning commission meeting, and then those recommendations would come back to city council.
All right, so there's a consensus motion by Councilmember Dawkins. Now, what's the difference between option 1 and 2? I'm trying to see, moves to accept, moves to modify.
That was if some of the proposed changes, the council did not want those to be moved forward, so they could change the content of them or take them out. Or,
For instance, if I'd have said 5, they recommend 6. If I wanted 5 customers, they're recommending no more than 6.
All right,
So
all right.
I'm going with the staff.
You're going option 1?
Completely. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I think it's very reasonable, and we have an ordinance now that we just have to catch these 2 businesses working outside the confines of their home, wrapping a car, pushing a sled, that sort of thing. And so I'm happy with the proposed, what staff has proposed. Thank you.
All right, there's a consensus motion by Councilmember Dawkins. Mayor Pro Tem, you had something to add to this?
I just had a quick question, just for information. When I'm reading this motion, so what I'm understanding is staff is going to present this to the Planning Commission, and then it's going to come back to us again
yes,
for another vote.
it's a change to the UDO, so yes.
Yes, so then it will come back for another vote. Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
All right, this is consensus motion by Councilmember Dawkins for option 1 to accept proposed changes that will go to the Planning Commission, and then back, those findings will come back to the City Council. All right, those in favor of option 1, show of hands. Okay. Those opposed, show of hands. All right, let's get a, for the clarity for the clerk, those in favor, hands again, of proposed changes, option 1, going to the Planning Commission. Okay, all right, so that is Councilman Davis, Dawkins, Colvin, Jensen, Hare. All right, those opposed. Councilmember Ingram, Jones, Wright, yes, 5-5. All right, so, all right, remains tabled until otherwise discussed. All right, thank you. All right, item 4.07. These are council member requests. As you know, the requests are, according to the city policy, set up for 5 minutes just to gain consensus for staff or other elements of the.
Mr. Mayor, we have one more item.
Do we? What am I missing?
It sure
Dr.
looks
Newton.
like that, but it actually moved from an item that you had as a council member request before you took your recess, and we
Home
are providing you that
occupation.
information.
Oh, 4.07. No, which one, what's the number? So they have city council requests to mail a notification, so it shouldn't have been a request tonight. It should be staff presentation, right?
Yes, sir. If you'll see the other ones, we list those as city council member agenda item request
Oh,
dash.
okay. Well,
So this is
okay.
a report back on this.
Yeah, what's the request that made it confusing, but okay, understood. Dr. Newton,
Sir.
it's getting late, so you know.
Yes, it is. And we tried to make this one difficult for you, but it actually is rather simple. I have a presentation. You have a CCAM that we put together to try to give you this information. Councilmember Hare had asked you guys to look at this concept of what if we take the 500-foot and make it 1,000? And what does that look like? Can we do it? this is one of the nice examples that we have in your current ordinance that actually allows you the flexibility to do that without going through a whole bunch of maneuvers. You already have something in your ordinance that allows that to be done. I'll go through the presentation, but I want you to understand that we can do this, and we can do this as early as the meetings that are going to be showing up for notification on the 22nd of August without going through extra changes to any ordinance.
So just to be clear, council, just to remind us, so this is a request that was brought by Councilmember Hare to notify people involving a matter, not only 500 feet radius, but to change it to 1,000 feet radius.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
and I would.
That's more people.
I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that my dad, the mathematician, reminds you that sometimes you see a number and you think one thing, but it's different. So remember the area, the pi r squared factor of this one. When you go from 500 to 1,000, it's not double. It actually is a fourfold increase in the area that's being covered. That's in part of your presentation. But when we look at it, it comes down to really three different things. What's the downside in doing it? Well, it costs a little bit more. Well, this isn't a hard item to reverse if we find out there's no benefit to it. What's the upside is you're going to have more people informed of what's going on. A potential issue that happens when you have legislative hearings, and currently you're saying 15 minutes that you have for those in favor, those against. You may have a room full of people who just want to be involved. Remember, legislative is when you can do what you want on that. A potential downside on the quasi-judicial is they may be notified, but are they really an expert witness, or are they someone who's going to be impacted by it? But again, the idea that we're making it available to the public and having them more informed is good. So you have the presentation. Happy to run through it with you.
So you were right, Dr. Newton. You did try to complicate it, but it is simple.
Hey, you did two things to me. You said that it's running late, and I tried to come up with a way to make this longer, but I gave you that we can do this right away.
Well, I'm just talking about the pi r squared calculation.
Well,
All right.
let me just give you the hint
we're
on
tracking.
it. The pi, the 22 over 7, generally, you can throw that out of the equation, just do the r squared.
Yeah, we got you. Yeah, we got you. Okay. All right, council, this is pretty self-explanatory, even though I guess Councilmember Hare, you have something before we take a consensus?
No, sir, if we're getting ready to do the consensus.
Yes, I'm going to you, sir. It's your floor. Got a question, Councilmember Ingram, before we
Given
go?
what you stated, do we need to suspend the rules for an official vote to?
No,
Okay,
it's just consensus. It'll come back for.
Oh, I thought he said something was coming up so that we would need to.
He said he could institute it as soon as some of the current items, correct?
Okay.
Yeah. I'm certainly not the one who can make that official decision, but from our standpoint, it doesn't require anything changed in your ordinances. It is a way that we can administratively start doing it.
Just about more
And
steps.
one of the things that I talk about in leadership discussions is sometimes when you have big decisions, you can make a decision that you can take. It doesn't cost much, but implications are potentially real good. If it doesn't work out, you adjust it. And that's kind of what this is. You looked at this a few years ago, brought it up, it didn't do much, you brought it back down. We're going already way past what the state says, but it doesn't really hurt us to try to get more people involved. So
Right.
I don't believe it will need to come back to you. You'll
Okay.
just be seeing more people who are getting notified show up at potentially at the
Gotcha.
22nd.
All right.
And if I could, Mayor and Dr. Newton, yes, and it has fluctuated. It's fluctuated a number of times, at least since I've been on council. But within that, I think we're down to the 500 feet now, right?
Or up, depending
Okay.
on how you look at it.
Yes, sir.
From
But
abutting
all,
to 500.
all sincerity here, because it's,
Yes.
it's very seriously to the community.
Yes.
There were a number of them that were not being receiving notification of a major issue that was getting ready to take place in their community, just because the mailing notification had been lowered.
Right.
So even though we can smile at it back and forth, it is very, very important to communities that they get the full notification. And I would like to request a consensus, Mayor, that we increase the mail-in notification for land use cases.
All right. So there's a motion for consensus to increase the radius for notification. I think it was seconded by Councilmember Jones. All right. Discussion. Those in favor, show of hands, council. All right. Change is made.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Newton.
Thank you, Dr. Newton.
All right. Now we are at 4.08 through 4.013, City Council Member Agenda Item Request. As you know, this is a time in which council members have 5 minutes to present an item to gain consensus to ask for more information or the engagement of staff to bring back the information. So we'll ask the clerk to start the 5 minutes, and we will move according to the agenda. Starting with item 4.08, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I would like to use my 3 of my 5 minutes to talk about what the topic is, and then ask Director Mike Gibson to come up and affirm the resolution. My council member request centers around construction of basketball courts in and around District 6. Based on the new lines we drew, District 6 now starts at the intersection of Cumberland Road and Bingham. It does not exactly include Hope Mills Road, Sherwood Park area anymore. I went by today and I looked behind the certain schools where there are basketball courts, and the rims are off and the backboards are down. And behind those elementary schools and middle schools. But if you look at the court's not a full court. It's a small elementary kid school court. So actually there are no full basketball courts in District 6 at all. But I had a great discussion with the Director of Parks and Rec, and we talked about programming that might otherwise suffice and work in our benefit, meaning gyms in our area that are open, that might be open, to make sure that we have some of those resources available to basketball-minded people who are not in the middle of basketball season, i.e. open play time at the gymnasium. Myers has it. Over by Fayetteville State has it all the time. Open gym is big. So how to get open gym is part of what we do. And then to see what the capabilities are to make sure that families might have time who may want to play basketball in the evening to do so. But again, Mr. Gibson and I talked through it. And he can come up and say a few words if he wants to, but he did a good job of talking through what we can do to make sure that those resources are available. So I want to thank him for that.
Mr. Gibbs?
Thank you, Council. Right quick. One of the things we found out today is that Stony Point is one of our heaviest athletic uses. We had Summer League basketball going on, and they have 20 youth basketball teams and 8 soccer teams, and their open play is very limited. So we're going to be working with the school systems to see how we can partner with them to get those goals back up if we have to put them back up on the outdoor courts, and then find out exactly when the summer leagues are over, because they're using John Griffin, John Griffin, New Century, and Stony Point gyms for basketball practice consistently, and they only have basketball open play on Fridays from 10 to 12. So there's no time for the general public to come into, and that's just how tight it is over there. So we're going to figure out how we can get those outdoor basketball courts done, even if we have to try to enlarge some of them, and then work with the school system to see as much as we can get the indoor facilities with some more help to keep them open a little longer.
Okay. So Councilman Davis, what's your ask of council?
Appreciate that. My ask, I guess, is nothing now. I guess we'll just wait to see what Director Gibson comes back with in terms of assets, resources for basketball in an area. That means enlarging courts. I would ask that council be willing to financially support expanding those courts, that they're actually full-length basketball courts if possible. Because right now they're smaller. I know at Email Huntingcut, the goal is 6 feet high. And it's right in the back of a school. So I understand why security might be a big thing, because young kids, but just to see how we can expand resources in that area.
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Mr. Gibson, down at Person Street, the fire station park, what is the potential to outfit a basketball court similar to the same setup at the fire station on Hope Mills Road? Because from my understanding, with what the council passed for us to look into the rec center over near Sherwood Park, future development, if we have the funds to go ahead and start building towards that and help, with that situation, we already have a model of what a fire station and basketball court park looks like. I think if possible, with community, maybe fundraising, we could do that. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. At Sherwood Park, we already work with the school system there. Even down at J.W. Kuhn, there's an opportunity to enlarge it even worse. But you're going away from District 6 is what Councilmember Davis is talking about, because we already do it behind Sherwood Park. There's already three full courts
Mr.
there.
Gibson, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Davis. Item 4.09, Councilmember request, Councilmember Hare, will you?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm glad that we have a number of our newly elected council members coming in concerning a council member request. And a council member request during a work session is simply a request from a council member to explore and bring back information to the council to see if it's something that will be accepted to move forward. And I must say that when I did my council member request, even though my intent was honest intent, I did not write it the way that I should have written it. And normally when you are doing a council member request, you can look out and make a request from staff to help you with it. They know exactly how it's to be done, and they had written my council member request, and then I changed some things on it. So I wanted to just to kind of come back and reword what I had requested or wanted to request. And because I've spoken to a number of our state, federal, and local folk to even consider our county commissioners, and they have a some form of retirement that some people probably didn't even know existed. So what I would like to make a request to get support that staff requests retirement times of service and deferment compensation of our local, state, and our federal elected officials. And that was what my request was about, sir.
All right, so Councilman Dawkins, you had a question?
I wanted to add to it, Mr. Mayor, in hopes that the council would take a consensus for these ideas. I don't think the general public is aware. The county commissioners, and I want the staff to bring this back. They make about $10,000 more a year with their benefits and cash compensation than we do, and that's not right. We work just as many hours. To say this is part-time is just not true. Technically, if it's part-time, we couldn't be on the health insurance plan, but we are allowed to participate on the health insurance plan, which is a federal requirement of 30 hours per week. I can assure you that we put in 30 hours a week and many hours more than that. I know I do. I'm sure most of our other council members do. But what I'm asking the council member Hare to consider adding to it is that we ask staff to look at a tax deferment. For instance, we're talking about $500 a month. So my suggestion is $500 a month go into a deferred compensation plan that, in effect, yes, staff tells us how much the $500 a month would be if you were elected 3 times. If you're elected 3 times in Raleigh for the North Carolina House, North Carolina Senate, you get your full pay for the rest of your life, and you get health insurance for the rest of your life. So 6 years, 3 times being elected. So if we looked at a 3 times being elected to qualify for a deferred cash plan of, say, $500 a month, you have to be on council. You cannot touch it while you are on council. So, for instance, DJ Hare, Kathy Jensen, Mitch Cove and Johnny Dawkins could benefit from a deferred compensation plan this session, say beginning January 1. Courtney Banks McLaughlin, Shaquilla Ingram could then benefit because they've been elected twice now. They would get elected one more time, probably, possibly, and then they could then benefit from $500 a month in deferred compensation. So it would not be a retirement plan. So for instance, 16 months going January going to November, it'd be 11 months times $500 a month, $5,500 that I could not touch unless I was off of council if you look at the minimum of 3 terms. So that is what I'm asking Councilmember Hare to allow to be considered in this consensus.
Thank you, Councilman Dawkins. Councilmember Ingram.
No, I just want to get a clarification. We are asking staff to bring back what we can and cannot do as it relates to deferment, retirement, XYZ. Correct? That's what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
We're only asking what we can and cannot do, not saying make this up for us, okay?
All right. That's
All right, thank you.
All right. And again, that was a great point to kind of end this when we have 3 seconds to go. So this is just a consensus for more information. And I think he read it to see what's comparable with local government, which are the county commissioners. They do have some form of something. So county commissioners, state and federal information if there's a consensus. So council, is there a consensus to get more information on this item? Show of hands, those in favor. All right, those opposed? Okay, all right, so Mr. Manager, just get back more information for the listening public. I know there was a lot of innuendos and chatter online about this, but at the end of the day, this is for information, and we'll continue to bring that information back if any action is taken. Item 4.010, Councilmember Kinston.
Thank you, Mayor. For this particular item, there was some discussion before we went on break about stormwater issues and the homeowners being responsible for their culverts on easement properties. I did submit 2 different pictures for review, but I would like for council to gain a consensus to go back and review that policy and some of the things that are in place to see if there is anything that we can assist our homeowners in being able to get those cleaned up. The main concern is if we do have a major flood, there's no question that these particular areas would most likely occur some type of damage, and therefore I'm asking a consensus on taking that back for review.
All right, and that is, you're saying to review the drainage assistance
Yes.
program to possibly expand
And for those
it
that have easements, yes, sir.
for people who have easements or public infrastructure on their property? Okay. All right, question, Councilman Hare?
No, sir, I just that you know that I'm in agreement with this. I brought this, I don't know, several times this year to support our residents. So I'm very much in support of this item, and I would be supporting the consensus.
All right, we're gonna check the council's temperature in just a moment. Any other questions before we take consensus on that? All right, those in favor of re-looking at the policies for the stormwater drainage assistance qualifications? All right, it's 10-0, Mr. Manager. This is pretty clear from council. All right, item 4.011, Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, so this particular item is referring to the mural around the Market House. I think it's important that that there's a conversation of what's going to happen with the mural around the Market House. So I'm asking council to review, looking at some options that are available going forward.
Okay, and I think that's pretty timely, given the repurposing discussion that's occurring. So your ask of council is to consider the mural separately or as a part of that discussion?
Separately.
Okay, all right. And you're just asking for consensus to consider changing it or?
We're looking at what options available,
Okay.
leaving it, changing it.
Okay, all right. Council, any questions? All right, those in favor of,
I'm
you have a
sorry,
question?
I would like to see if we can add to that. I do think, given the conversation we had earlier about the market house, could there be an addition to allow the Human Relations Commission to handle that conversation, since they are already handling?
Well, the
the-
reason, yeah, and the
Go ahead.
reason I asked tonight was we've engaged them to continue conversation on the design of that whole area. So I would hope it would include that, but whatever your specific ask, this is your request, so.
I am not, to not having the Human Relations Committee to do that, but I think it needs to be a separate conversation.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? All right, those in favor of the requested consensus, show of hands to have the Human Relations review. Mills, okay. All right, and item 4.012, Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, so on this particular one, it is referring to council assignments and committees and liaisons, so I was doing some research on there. So this one is to gain consensus with council on our appointments and reviewing it, that where a council member serves 2 consecutive full terms, that we make sure that that particular policy is either looked at or reviewed or changed based on circumstances.
Questions?
Councilmember Hare, question?
Yes, sir. I want to make sure that I'm understanding. Are you speaking of the mayor's committees that he assigns?
Right, because right now it says that a council to any board shall not serve more than 2 consecutive years with not having a 1-year interval in between those in the policy, based on,
Are you saying a board or a committee?
well, the appointment for us, for boards.
A board, so was that talking about us?
It's talking about us.
For boards?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So those are the ones that you appoint, and isn't it, and that you put us on, right?
No, I think we are the liaison on certain boards by virtue of position. Like PwC has a PwC liaison. I guess that's what she's talking about. Committees are different. So she'll have to kind of explain what she's talking about. I'm not sure.
So right now, if as a appointment, if you put us on a board or a committee, then we can't serve more than 2 years.
Who puts us on it?
Mayor.
Okay,
If
she's
mayor
talking
puts
about
us
mayor.
on
She's talking about
more than 2 years, you can't serve more than 2 years. So I'm asking for council to go back and look at that to see, do we need to change it? Or do we need to increase it based on our policies and procedures? That's what it says.
Ingram?
Thank you. I am familiar with the policy that states
It's 1
about
1510.
chairing. I'm familiar with it, talks about chairing a council committee. So are you referring to that as well? Because chairing and being liaison, to me, are 2 different things, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding
Chairing.
Chairing. Okay, so we're solely talking about if we are chairing, for instance, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Hare, they've chaired certain committees for more than 2 years. And what you're saying now is, because we've not operated in that policy, we need to go back and determine, do we need to add more time to it or enforce the policy?
Yes, and it's
Thank
based
you.
on policy number 110.2 and 115.10.
Thank you.
All right, so just to restate, any, Mayor Pro Tem Jensen, you had to say? All right, so just to restate that, this is a request for council to review the policy as stated regarding the chair of the committees or boards.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just one more question about that. So whenever you are starting a new election cycle, as we are getting ready to do, does that disregard that change because this is a new cycle, a new council, or?
I think if there's a consensus, that policy would be reviewed and then the discussion would ensue. But I think if I'm not looking at the policy, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not reading it. But I guess what she's saying is the language in there that it could be reviewed or changed at that time by the new council. But I think it carries over from council to council. But I'm not looking at it, so I don't know. Like, is it applicable to the term, or is it applicable to the person's
It
life?
says consecutive 2 years, so it
Which
doesn't go by the.
which the terms are 2 years. So if somebody chairs something for 2 years, I don't know that carries over to another elected term, but that would be a part of the
I
conversation.
guess that's one of the reasons why we need to look at it, Mayor.
So that would be a part of the conversation if there's a consensus. So council, show of hands for staff to bring that back, information. All right. And that is just a work session to review or to include that in the notes as we do on the administrative reports, and if there's a desire to get into it further. All right. Item 4.013, Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, sir. So on this one here, and looking at our policies and procedures during the month of July, there are some that are outdated, and there's some that we need to actually go in and update due to the pandemic, things like that, that are not in the policies. So I'm asking for review, maybe for you to set a subcommittee to review policies number 105.1 to 165.3, to bring those up to what the current situations are. Some of them are dated back to '09 that are outdated.
So you're saying there's a conflict between, because I knew we made some adjustments for remote governance, so you're saying that, is it related
There's some
to
other,
that?
yeah, there's some other ones in there.
Oh,
that-
okay.
And I'll be more than happy, I can.
All right, so if
share
you're
some of
amenable
those.
to it, when he's bringing back the administrative report for that previous item, maybe it could include some education on that
They're
section?
separate. They're two separate things.
No, I understand they're two separate things, but I'm saying it from the timing of it. So if he's bringing back policy 1.01, what you're saying, policy 1.02 through 1.05 also need to be reanalyzed? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, from 105.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the numbers are accurate, but okay. All right, council, is there consensus for that? All right.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor, I will add that I do think there should be some type of council just to go through this, to gather different perspectives. So that I do agree that there should be some type of committee to set up to work with our city attorney.
Karen, you need some help in your office, huh? So-
No, that's
No,
not
I
what I'm
understood your
saying.
point.
That's
I
not what I'm
understood your point.
saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I was
I'm
being
talking
facetious.
about okay.
I understood your point. I was being facetious. No, I was being facetious because I saw her looking. Her head raised up when you said that. So, all right, good meeting, council. Welcome back. So, motion to adjourn. All right.